for the Philippine National Anthem.
Mga kababayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas.
Kayang mag-ibig, kay mas nagsinakanan, alam ng puso, sa titik mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, tuyag ka ng magiting, sa mandulupin, di ka pasisingil, sa nagatang tutok sa simoy at sa langit ng bagaw, ay hinatang tula, kawin sa pagkayang minamahal, ang isang ng matawad mo'y tagumpay na nag-iindig, ang bituin at araw niya kailan pang ay di magtitingin. Luman ang araw ng walhati pagsinta, buhay langit sa piling ko. Ang hindi kaya na pagkay mag-aami, at mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
Please be seated. Good morning, everyone. Let us welcome our moderators for today. Department of Budget and Management Undersecretary Margo Salcedo and Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas Managing Director Antonio Joselito Lambino II.
Good morning, everyone. Magandang umaga po.
Good morning, everyone. Members of the Diplomatic Corps led by Archbishop Charles Brown, members of the Cabinet, government officials, distinguished guests, friends, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Post-State of the Nation Address Economic Briefing.
Good morning, Margo. This event serves as the first national economic briefing under the administration of President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. and is a follow-up to his State of the Nation address yesterday.
And this event will be anchored on the theme of economic recovery and transformation. It will also highlight the Marcos administration's Socioeconomic Agenda.
Key government officials from the economic, infrastructure, and human development and poverty reduction clusters are here today to provide more detail on the government's plans and programs.
So to formally open our program, may we call on stage the chair of the government's Economic Development Cluster, none other than Secretary Benjamin Diokno of the Department of Finance.
My fellow cabinet members and workers in government, Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, Governor Felipe Medalla, members of the Diplomatic Corps, our reliable partners in the business community, development organizations, academe and labor groups, and friends from the media here and abroad. Good morning. Thank you for coming to the first Post-State of the Nation Address Economic Briefing. The Philippines' solid macroeconomic fundamentals, reinforced by structural reforms, enabled us to withstand the harsh effects of the pandemic and chart a clear path to recovery. It is on this firm ground that the Marcos administration commits to build a robust economy for a faster, greener, and more inclusive growth that benefits all Filipinos. Our growth prospects are bright. The economy is expected to expand by 6.5 to 7.5% in 2022 and 6.5 to 8% from 2023 to 2028. Analysts consider our near-term growth projections to be the highest among the ASEAN plus 3 countries, which include Japan, South Korea, and China. Investor confidence has continuously improved. Last year, our foreign direct investment inflows reached a record high of $10.5 billion. For the first 4 months of this year, FDI inflows already amounted to $3.4 billion, up by 12.1% from the previous year's level. We attribute this to the enabling business environment strengthened by the reopening of the economy, the passage of the Corporate Recovery and Tax Incentives for Enterprises Act, as well as the enactment of game-changing structural reforms. While our economic growth continues to be robust, the operating environment remains uncertain and difficult, with many challenges that must be addressed. Inflation is expected to remain elevated for as long as world prices of oil and other key commodities remain high. The effects of the pandemic linger while the global political economy remains unpredictable. But the Philippines is fully prepared to address the challenges ahead. The Marcos administration will implement a comprehensive 8-point socioeconomic agenda to decisively respond to this risk and steer the economy back to its high growth trajectory. In the near term, the plan seeks to address the immediate challenges confronting the Filipino people: rising prices, scarring from the COVID-19 pandemic, and ensuring sound macroeconomic fundamentals. Over the medium term, the goal is to create more jobs, not just any other jobs, but quality jobs and green jobs. We will achieve this goal through higher investments in infrastructure, human capital development, and digitalization. These interventions will enable us to cut the poverty incidence to 9% by 2028 and elevate the country to upper middle income status. We will do all of this while exercising fiscal discipline. The economic team is committed to implementing a medium-term fiscal framework. This serves as our blueprint to reduce fiscal deficit, promote fiscal sustainability, and enable robust economic growth. The framework proposes measures that will improve tax administration, enhance the fairness and efficiency of our tax system, and promote environmental sustainability to address climate change. In addition, we will work for the passage of the remaining tax reform package of the Duterte administration. Our fiscal consolidation strategy will bring down our debt to GDP ratio from the current 63.5% to less than 60% by 2025. It will cut the deficit to GDP ratio from the current 6.4% to 3% by 2028. The implication is clear. We do not have to borrow as much as we did during the crisis years. And at the same time, we will continue to boost domestic economic activity with our massive infrastructure investments at 5 to 6% of GDP annually. While challenges persist, these are not insurmountable. The previous administrations have left behind a legacy of successes and lessons to learn from. We will use this to sharpen our policy toolkit and introduce needed structural reforms. The executive branch will closely coordinate it with Congress to formulate and enact appropriate and timely policy measures. We will expand the private sector's role in driving the transformation of our economy. Lastly, we will widen the space for civil society to turn the collective aspirations of the Filipino people into reality. We are making a bid for lasting change, and we can only do this if we work in unity. I'm confident that we have the right people at the helm and a clear, focused plan that will build a truly inclusive and sustainable economy that the Filipino people deserve. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Jokno.
Sa pangarap na maging mapayapa ang ating bansa, ang pangarap nyo ay pangarap ko. Sa pangarap na maging maunlad ang ating bansa, ang pangarap nyo ay pangarap ko. At sa pangarap na maging mas masinang ang kinabukasan natin at ng ating mga anak, ang pangarap nyo ay pangarap ko.
The robust growth witnessed during the first quarter of 2022 propelled the Philippines to become one of the fastest-growing economies in the ASEAN region. The new administration of President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. is keen to sustain the country's economic growth momentum. Despite the external challenges, the newly elected leadership is ready for the task and is steadfast in pursuing its vision of economic recovery and transformation to heal the nation.
We live in difficult times, brought about by some forces of our own making, but certainly also by forces that are beyond our control. But we have, and we will continue to find solutions. The medium-term fiscal strategy of this administration seeks to attain short-term macro-fiscal stability while remaining supportive of the country's economic recovery and to promote medium-term fiscal sustainability. Measurable medium-term macroeconomic and fiscal objectives include 6.5 to 7.5% real gross domestic product growth in 2022, 6.5 to 8% real GDP growth annually between 2023 and 2028, 9% or single-digit poverty rate by 2028. 3% national government deficit to GDP ratio by 2028, less than 60% national government debt to GDP ratio by 2025. At least $4,256 income per capita and the attainment of upper middle income status by 2024.
The Marcos administration will employ a whole-of-government approach to realize its medium-term fiscal framework and the 8-point Socioeconomic Agenda, aimed at steering the country towards a high-growth trajectory and achieving inclusive and resilient economic development.
Our first priority is to address the most pressing concerns of our people, rising inflation and economic challenges brought about by the pandemic. We have a focused and clear plan of action to sustain strong-based growth for the next 6 years. To ensure that our goals are on track, the economic team will spearhead the implementation of medium-term fiscal framework. This framework serves as our blueprint to reduce the fiscal deficit, promote fiscal sustainability, and enable robust growth. The framework proposes policies that will enhance the fairness and efficiency of our tax system, bolstered by the full digital transformation of our revenue agencies.
Instituting policies that will steer the economy towards a high and sustainable growth trajectory that is resilient to shocks or crises is imperative.
We aim to rapidly reduce poverty to a single-digit level by 2028 by shepherding the formulation of socioeconomic strategies, plans and programs, supporting creation of more jobs, better jobs, and resilient jobs. The road to our country's socioeconomic transformation demands policy interventions that will elevate our potential for inclusive growth and promote the welfare of the most vulnerable Filipinos. We shall push for these necessary measures as we build on foundations laid by past structural reforms. These serve as a springboard for recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic and a path to sustainable economic development.
Translating the socio-economic plan into impactful policies, programs, and projects requires a prudent fiscal management and enhanced bureaucratic efficiency.
We are one with the President and vow to contribute to the pursuit of economic prosperity where no one is left behind. While addressing the current global challenges, we shall maximize our limited fiscal space and commit to prioritizing food sufficiency, infrastructure, and climate change goals. And we will do so with complete integrity, competence, and diligence. To strengthen integrity, prevent corruption, expedite interagency coordination, and ensure immediate delivery of public goods and services, we shall also expedite the digitalization of our public financial management system and the reforms on the procurement process and law. We will also right-size the bureaucracy, empower our local government through full devolution, and make strategic expenditures in high-impact capital initiatives to provide additional stimulus.
The government will focus on promoting competitiveness and productivity of industry, especially of micro, small, and medium enterprises, and protecting consumer welfare.
We in the Department of Trade and Industry are committed to enabling small businesses, promoting export-oriented industrialization, and empowering and protecting consumers. Through innovation-driven programs, we will help small businesses operate efficiently, reduce costs, and earn profits while they produce quality and affordable products. Our industrialization efforts will focus on 3 priority clusters that have immense potential for growth in the country, namely industrial, manufacturing, and transport cluster, technology, media, and telecommunications cluster, and Health and Life Sciences cluster. DTI will continue to push for immediate ratification of the Regional Comprehensive Partnership Agreement and negotiate for other trade agreements to attract more foreign investments, enhance access to strategic markets, and diversify our country's exports. Consumers' interests will continue to be front and center in our work. DTI will enhance the rights of Filipino consumers and help ensure that Filipinos have affordable and adequate access to basic needs.
In addition to effective, efficient, and prudent fiscal management, macroeconomic stability will also be supported by sound monetary policy.
On our part, the BSP will remain committed to our core mandates of price and financial stability and promote financial digitalization and inclusion to continue providing an enabling environment for inclusive and sustainable economic growth. As an inflation-targeting central bank, our objective is to bring inflation back to within 2 to 4% target range. The BSP has already tightened its monetary policy settings through interest rate hikes, and we stand ready to take further action if necessary. At the same time, we continue to back non-monetary interventions by national government to reduce supply-side pressures on inflation. Under our digital payments transformation roadmap, by 2023, we aim to first, digitalize at least half of the financial transactions, and second, for at least 70% of Filipino adults to own transaction accounts. The roadmap includes strategies and initiatives to facilitate the development of an efficient, inclusive, safe, and secure digital payments ecosystem.
Despite many challenges, our future remains bright. With decisive new leadership, a more progressive and inclusive economy is within reach.
To my fellow Filipinos, I do not intend to diminish the risks and the challenges that we face in this turbulent time in global history. And yet, I see sunlight filtering through these dark clouds. We have assembled the best Filipino minds to help navigate us to this global crisis that we are now facing. we will endure. Let our Filipino spirit ever remain undimmed. I know this in my mind. I know it in my heart. I know it in my very soul. The state of the nation is sound.
Thank you to all who prepared that next day edit audiovisual presentation on the administration's socio-economic agenda. If you hear snoring coming from anywhere in reception hall, that would be them. Anyway, now we move on to our first panel session. For this session, we will hear from the economic managers on their plans on recovery and transformation. Our moderator for the first panel is none other than DBM Undersecretary Margo Salcedo. Yusek Margo, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tony. I call him Dr. Tony because he's actually Managing Director of the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. So he's MD. So to me, he's Dr. Tony. So good morning again, everyone. It's truly a pleasure to be here with you today. And I am very, very excited to kick off the first panel discussion on economic development. Following the President's SONA yesterday and Secretary Jokno's keynote address, I'm sure you now already have a clearer picture of the administration's economic priorities and plans. So to give us more details on this, let me now call on our key economic officials to please join me on stage, starting with, of course, the chairman of the Economic Development Cluster, Department of Finance Secretary Benjamin Diokno. Secretary Jokno will be joined by Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas Governor Felipe Medalla. We also have with us National Economic and Development Authority Secretary Arsenio Balisacan. And we also have with us Department of Trade and Industry Secretary Alfredo Pascual. And last but not the least, and to me the most important because she's my boss, Department of Budget and Management Secretary Amina Pangandaman. And so now I will be joining our distinguished panel. Before anything else, could we please check our mics if our microphones work? We would not want to miss a word that any of you would say. Hello. Good morning, good morning. Can everyone say good morning?
Good morning.
Good morning, ma'am. So before
good morning,
any...
good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Wasn't that an amazing, electrifying, empowering State of the Nation address yesterday? Maybe just for a backgrounder for our audience today, in case you missed the hour and a half very empowering speech of President Ferdinand Marcos. One of the highlights, shall we begin with this? One of the highlights that he began with was the medium-term fiscal framework. And he said that we will be having a medium-term fiscal strategy that has an 8-point socio-economic agenda. So we have with us our NEDA Secretary. Could you kindly, sir, enlighten us on this medium-term fiscal strategy that our president is very proud of?
Thank you.
Actually, the eight-point agenda was ably enumerated already earlier in the presentation of
Yes, yes.
Sec Joc. No? But let me emphasize that the 8 points agenda has the two components. One is the near term, the other one is the medium term. For the near term, the issues are, and that we aim to address are accelerate the high prices or the inflation, the vulnerability of our population to shocks, and the scars, addressing the scars that the pandemic has have caused. No? And in the medium term, it's all about job creation and sustaining growth of 6.5 to 8% during the period. And for that to happen, we need to address the constraints to growth, constraint to employment, quality employment creation that have been well identified in various fora, even by our own development partners. And these include issues affecting infrastructure, and as you have seen, infrastructure is going to be a major focus here of this administration. The issues on energy, it's also a major concern that we are going to address, and the logistics issues. And insofar as job creation is concerned, of course, we have to address the two sides of the market. On the supply side, we will need to look at the employability of our workers and their education, health, and that's why opening up the school system to full face-to-face is a high priority. Opening up the economy to fully was emphasized by the President. That's a means to reduce and to address the scars quickly. And finally, with respect to the creation of jobs, on the demand side, we look at again these constraints to job creation, and I would like to emphasize here that developing our high quality jobs, creating sectors, particularly manufacturing, will be highlighted, and that as part of this is to also get the private sector interested. And here, as you have heard in the President's speech, there is going to be a strengthening of the public-private partnership, and that will allow us to get the economy going even as we are constrained by the debt. But the whole objective is to outgrow the debt, as Sec Ben has been emphasizing, by getting the economy growing at 6.5 to 8%. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. That's very optimistic, but you did mention economic constraints, and so may we ask our Bangko Sentral governor, considering that the President himself acknowledged that we need economic recovery, and he also mentioned inflation rates. How will the current inflation and policy rate affect the outlook on monetary and financial stability vis-a-vis economic growth?
Okay, so to begin with, as stated by the President and by Secretary Jokno, much of our inflation is what's called supply side, and a big part of it is imported. But we had to act because what we're afraid of is this imported inflation will have a life of its own and start self-fulfilling prophecy of prices are rising because prices are rising. So we increased the policy rate by, well, we did it 3 times, 25 basis points, 25 basis points, and then a surprise 75. It's a surprise because it was not in the calendar to meet on interest, And of course, 75 was considered large. However, when you look at it, there's still, our monetary policy is still very supportive of economic growth. Indeed, the policy rate, which used to be a record low 2%, is now just around 3.25%. So, by and large, our estimate is the economy can absorb the increase in the policy rate. Of course, our own models in the BSP says that in spite of all these increases in the policy rate, the government's forecast of 6.5 to 7.5 this year is well within reach. And 6.5 to 8.5 going forward, 2023 and onwards, are still all quite attainable. The other point is that we also looked at the banks. Of course, the banks hold the government securities. The price of the securities will fall as interest rates rise. But again, we look at the capitalization of the banks. The banks are very adequately capitalized, so they can absorb the rate hikes. So we're very optimistic that the monetary policy and credit supply will remain supportive of growth and financial stability. So going forward, of course, there is so much uncertainty, but we stand ready to make the necessary adjustments so that balancing between maintaining and sustaining growth and ensuring financial stability on the one hand and price stability on the other will all be achieved. Of course, this year we will not meet our 2 to 4% target. Inflationary forces outside the Philippines are just too high. Indeed, even countries with very low inflation in the past, like Singapore, of course, the United States and the EU, are actually experiencing even higher inflation than we are. And as stated, the government is also undertaking measures that will protect the vulnerable. And in addition, the supply side measures. Like the government is relaxing import restrictions so that imported supply can augment domestic supply.
Thank you so much, sir. And so now we live in uncertain times globally, but thankfully we have economic geniuses in our midst, including the former Central Bank Governor, now Finance Secretary Ben Jokno, who helped us not only survive but thrive throughout the pandemic. So, sir, President Marcos in his State of the Nation address yesterday said that we have and we will find solutions. And one of the solutions that he mentioned was making the Philippines an investment destination. So with that, he said that he will continue the Build, Build, Build program that was started during the Duterte administration. And in fact, now it will become Build Better More. I had to think about that for a while because it's actually BBM. It's so clever. Build Better More. So as we continue to do infrastructure development spending at 5 to 6% of GDP for the next 6 years, does the government have the fiscal space for its infrastructure development program? And how does the government plan to fund such a massive infrastructure program?
The short answer to that question is yes. We have the fiscal space, and I have several reasons for the optimism. Number one, the Duterte administration left this government a sound tax system. It's a much better tax system than he inherited from the previous administration. And we will enhance the improved tax system. So that will give us more revenues. Number two, as mentioned by the President, we will right-size the government so that the government will be in a much better shape and we can do much more with less. So we'll have some efficiency gain as a result of that. Number three, when we came in, when the Duterte administration came in, we don't have a list of ready-to-implement projects. Now the Duterte administration is leaving us some easily 200 ready-to-implement projects. Okay? So with the game-changing reforms, such as the Public Service Act, we can actually use the public-private partnership to enhance implement some of those projects. So we will maximize our gain from the new legislation. And number four is that because we feel that this is our moment, the Philippine economy can move much faster this time compared to other stages in our economy. And so a stronger economy means more revenues down the road. Thank you.
Muntik na ako kumanta, sir. This is our moment. Okay, I'm just trying to wake everybody up. Okay, speaking of the solutions that President Marcos mentioned in his State of the Nation address yesterday, aside from making the Philippines an investment destination, another solution that he mentioned was what Secretary Jokno mentioned, which is having efficiency gains. And then he went on to talk about his legislative priorities, and those went straight to the priorities as well of our Budget Secretary, Amina Pangandaman. So ma'am, what are the priority budget reforms of the Marcos administration, and how will the administration ensure inclusivity in the national budget preparation? So maybe we'll go po to the legislative priorities of President Marcos and how these align with yours.
Thank you, Yusek Margo. You know, we are very lucky to have a president who is attuned and at the same time committed to advocate real reforms, both economic and structural. So two of the major legislative reforms, part of the top 19, is the right-sizing bill and the cash-based management. It's the Budget Modernization Act. As previously mentioned, the right-sizing bill will help our bureaucracy have an agile, efficient, responsive, and technology-driven workforce. So it is not actually a mass layoff of government workers. It is actually giving it more efficient to be able to service the people. And then second, it's the cash-based budgeting or the budget monetization system. This will instill or strengthen fiscal discipline among our government employees. We will use and allocate our scarce resources to be able to finance our priority programs and projects. We will ensure that every peso in our GAA will be spent and implemented timely. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. And then another solution that President Marcos mentioned was developing a Philippine brand that we can be proud of. Although he actually mentioned it to segue to the Department of Tourism, I think this is also very relevant, sir, for the Department of Trade and Industry, especially as we have many MSMEs who are creating their own Philippine brands that we are all very, very proud of. So maybe for Secretary Pascual, we could ask, MSMEs represent a major growth area in the Philippine economy. How can DTI build their business amidst the digital revolution, and how can SMEs be encouraged to think global?
Well, we've heard our colleagues talk about the macro economy. Let me just try to address some of the meso and micro challenges that we're facing and the programs that we have lined up to address these challenges. The matter of the Philippine brand is very important if we are promoting Philippine exports. And of course, you mentioned already attracting visitors for tourism. We will work on that. We have the creative industry law that's coming up, and that could help us develop the Philippine brand. Now, I would like to also talk about the need for the country to industrialize already, to give that focus on industrialization. Before I go to MSMEs, I'd like to talk about the work we intend to do to develop industries so that we can create quality, higher quality, and higher paying jobs for Filipinos. And the video already focused on the 3 clusters of industries that we are going to look at. We need to address, of course, the constraints. There are structural and systemic constraints. Energy cost is one, and that, based on the speech of the President, will be addressed by going renewable and consider the adoption of nuclear energy in the Philippines. Now, the other challenge, of course, is the cost of logistics, and that will be addressed by the PPP and other infrastructure projects that the government will implement, as well as organizing our logistics sector, which are so fragmented at the moment. I met with them last week, and we have agreed, to coordinate more so we can avoid the so many transfers of goods that that make logistic costs go up. The other area of industrialization is in the emerging field, and we're lucky to be a source of green metals like nickel, cobalt, and copper. Unfortunately, we have been selling these metals as ores. We are exporting these metals as ores, and we are not able to maximize the value addition. We need to move towards further processing of these ores so we are able to generate more value addition locally before we export the metals. These metals are critical in the new industries, particularly in the manufacture of batteries that go into electric vehicles, into hyperscalers devices. So it's going to be it is going to go into higher demand products that will be needed for these emerging industries. In the health sciences, I think the President mentioned about generic medicine. That's something that we're going to encourage, either to be provided to us by multinationals, but formulated and manufactured in the Philippines through tolling arrangements with the local companies. But we are also encouraging our local pharmaceutical industry to go into more production of generics. Now, on MSMEs, the 3 things we're making sure that they will have are market access, technology, and finance. And through digitalization, we hope to be able to provide these 3 things. We are developing e-commerce platforms in addition to the very popular e-commerce platforms that we know about. This will be dedicated to MSMEs, and this will surely provide them access to a wider market locally and hopefully in the global arena as well. On technology, we are very keen on helping our MSMEs to be driven by science and technology, and through that be able to introduce innovation together with digitalization, that these 2 will be the formula for their success. And hopefully, we will be seeing our MSMEs graduating from micro to small, from small to medium, and medium to large. But they have to be competitive, both locally and globally. In fact, they're being globally competitive is also important locally because our borders are open. We're importing a lot of goods against which local production has to compete. So our MSME should be globally competitive in the local market as well as in the global market.
Thank you so much.
By the way, the financing, with digitalization, financing will be almost automatic because with digitalization, the accumulation of transaction data will be available and can be the basis for credit scoring, and with the credit score, financing can be handled by financial institutions. Thank you.
More efficiency gains. So thank you so much, sir. So inspired. I'm starting a business today. Okay, so now you mentioned President Marcos's statement yesterday about how he will be tapping multinationals for pharmaceuticals. And in that respect, we recognize that the importance of the private sector. And so if we may ask the Finance Secretary once again, what areas of partnership or collaboration can the private sector endeavor to support the plans and programs of the Marcos administration?
So we have a recently approved law, for example, the Public Service Act that will open up private sector participation or international investment in telecommunication, toll roads, shipping, etc. But with respect to private sector, as you know, the contribution of government to the economy is only 20%. 80% is private sector. Telco is private sector in the Philippines, water is private sector, etc. So we will just provide the environment for the private sector to thrive. And of course, they are welcome to invest in a country whose growth potential is one of the highest in the region. So you're welcome. It's fairly open. Whatever comes to your imagination, you can come in. And in fact, the other thing is because there are now more resources given to the local governments, you can even invest in local activities. And by the way, as the President emphasized, he will focus, is on the rail system, right? Mass transit system. And as you open up more communities, like for example, if you construct that railway from Calamba to Matnog and to Sorsogon, that will open up a lot of areas. The railway system that we are currently doing from Manila to Malolos to Clark, that will also open up a lot of areas. And then, of course, the first ever subway system that we are constructing is a 20-kilometer subway system. So there's a lot of possibilities, and the private sector is welcome to participate in this economic boom for the Philippines.
Low bat. Thankfully, it's not my brain and just my mic. Okay, so thank you, and we hope that with all of these policies, the private sector will be encouraged to truly make the Philippines an investment destination. And given that, as Secretary Jokno mentioned, that we would like to create an environment conducive for the private sector to come in, may we ask our Bangko Sentral governor, are there any additional rate hikes in the horizon? What developments and factors will the BSP consider with respect to its policy decision?
One thing I can say is you can surprise people only once. So there will be no more off cycle. As to how many more rate hikes before the end of the year, that will be very data dependent. On the one hand, here I come. You need an economist with two hands. On the one hand, the current drop in the price of oil, it's now below 100, signals that there's less a need for rate hikes. On the other hand, the U.S. is surely going to raise its policy rate by 75 basis points, where you are in a situation where the U.S. policy rate and the Philippine policy rate are now almost very little difference between the two. And like it or not, the U.S. dollar is the safe haven currency. So, and too much depreciation of the peso, what we economists call overshooting, could actually add to an inflation that's already high. So these are the things we are balancing. So there are forces, changes that say that, well, there will be more rate hikes, but not too much. But there are forces too that say, well, as long as the U.S. keeps jacking up rates, very hard for a small open economy not to respond at least partially. So my own guess is, well, our next meeting is August. And if you were to bet on three numbers, 0, 25, four numbers, 0, 25, 50, 75, you can rule out just like in diving, you can rule out the lowest and the highest. Right? In diving, then you give the score. So I guess that's all I can say so far. Because to begin with, Secretary Jokno and I are just two votes in the Monetary Board. So I cannot say at this point how each one will be voting. But my guess, as I said, is maybe we can rule, come this August meeting, we can rule out 0 and we can rule out 75. Now, for the rest of the year, it all depends what happens outside the Philippines. A lot of the forces that drive inflation now are external, but what we don't want is the high inflation creates a momentum that people, you'll have wage adjustment, fare adjustment, so inflation begetting more inflation. What we call, terrible term, second order effects. And that's what monetary policy is looking at. Of course, you have to balance, because if we raise too much, the economy weakens to the point that it's actually bad for banks. Of course, it's also bad for people. On the other hand, high inflation, everybody hates high inflation. So that is the balancing act.
Okay, so speaking of that balancing act, sige na nga sir, gobyerno na lang mag-a-adjust. As President Marcos said yesterday, what he will do is there will be a realignment of our expenditure priorities. So maybe Secretary Pangandaman can enlighten us on this realignment of our expenditure priorities. What are your budget priorities, ma'am, now, and how do these align with the President's?
Of course, our budget will support our medium-term fiscal framework and the 8-point agenda presented a while ago. So maybe I can just share the top 5. While we are still working on the budget now, and we plan to submit this in Congress by August 22 and pass before the Christmas break. So maybe the top 5 will be, first, of course, we will allocate funding for education. It is a top priority as mandated by the Constitution. Second, we will also pour funding in the health sector. It is important to have a healthy and provide and increase productivity of our members in the society. Next is, of course, our infrastructure sector. We will still continue with the build of the previous administration and expand the same up to 2 trillion maybe by 2028 of funding for our infrastructure sector. And of course, maybe in our top 5 for our budget next year will be funding for our agriculture. We will make our farmers and fisher folks more productive. We will support in terms of their services and mechanize, use technology in their processes, so we'll have self-sufficiency and self-security and lower the food prices in the country. Thank you.
Exciting times. Imagine top 5, not just education, but now also health and agriculture. Yesterday, at the State of the Nation address, President Marcos also mentioned a Philippine development plan, and he even said that NEDA has a deadline. Submit by the end of the year. So, sir, could you enlighten us on that Philippine development plan?
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Marco. The NEDA, as many of you know, prepares in coordination with other agencies the blueprint for socioeconomic development plan for the country. The elements of that plan for the current administration have been laid out. All we need to do now are put this together in a coherent framework so that we can have the basis for proper monitoring and reporting to the President, to Congress, stakeholders on the progress you are making in the implementation. It's going to be challenging, and this is the first time actually that we will produce a Philippine development plan before the start of the year of the implementation of that plan. We haven't been successful in producing a development plan before the start of the implementation. But this is great. It provides us an opportunity to ensure that it's a government as one, that all the agencies, all the concerned stakeholders are moving in one direction and not scattered around, and to ensure that the goals that we have aimed for ourselves will be achieved. And mind you, our intention here and our aspirations here is not to just achieve high growth, sustained growth of 6.5% to 8%, but even more importantly, to ensure that that growth is more inclusive this time than in the previous years, so that our Filipino people, the majority of poor people, will also rise with the tide. That's the intention, and critical to that is our success in generating high-quality jobs and raising productivity. Productivity should be the single, or not to say it's single, but a key measure of success, that we're able to get more with less with our resources. And that's our job, to coordinate that process of going there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. And I guess related to that, one of the things that was also mentioned by President Marcos yesterday, and also in the keynote address today, was our goal of having single-digit poverty and upper middle income status. One of the questions that we received from registration was, when will the Philippines attain upper middle income status? When? Deadline na naman, sir. When? And what does this mean to the majority of Filipino families, and what will drive the attainment of this goal? This is also for Secretary Balisacan.
At the rate we are growing, and assuming that we will achieve the 6.5 to 7.5 growth this year, and the 6.5 to 8% next year. We should be reaching that minimum of 4,250 US dollars, no? In 2024. By the time then we will become a member of the so-called upper middle income class. Now, that will mean that the size of the economic pie will be bigger, and that will mean that even without Secretary Jokno raising, the rates of taxes, the size of the government revenues will be much bigger, and so we have more resources for meeting public services, providing public services, and social protection, among other needs. So it's so crucial that we are able to grow quickly and sustain that growth, because that is really the more sustainable way of reducing poverty and achieving greater distribution of opportunities.
That is so encouraging, sir. 2024 is just around the corner, so we're very excited for achieving that dream. Manufacturing, for Secretary Pascual, manufacturing is a big driver for economic growth. So may we ask, how can we transform manufacturing into a globally competitive industry?
We are for manufacturing, we are focusing on areas where we have strategic advantage. Like, for example, many of our people are already in digital type jobs. So we'll move into manufacturing that will make full use of such skills. But quite apart from specific industries, I'd like to be able to encourage manufacturing by further empowering our private sector. It's very important, that we encourage the private sector to invest, both local investors and international investors. And we have to make it easy for them. If there are incentives given in a particular law, I would like us to be very careful in crafting the implementing rules and regulations so that no restrictions, additional restrictions, are added outside the law. I've seen this in the Renewable Energy Act, where foreign ownership restrictions have been introduced, although there is no provision for that in the law. And in the implementation of the CREATE Act, I hope, that whatever is provided as tax incentives will be implemented as provided for in the law. And then there is the issue also of bigness. There is a tendency to constrain the growing of companies. I think we need to encourage and support the growth of Philippine companies, particularly those who are going to compete in the international market, because in the globalized and highly contestable market, the players are all big companies, and we need big companies, to compete with their counterparts from foreign countries. Those are a few thoughts that come to mind, when you ask about how we encourage and how we support manufacturing.
Thank you, sir. Another item that President Marcos mentioned yesterday in his State of the Nation address, I guess leading to empowerment, is empowerment of local government units. And he mentioned the Mandanas ruling. Could we ask our Finance Secretary if he could enlighten us on this and how this will affect or how this will empower our local governments?
Okay, for the information of the audience, the Mandanas ruling, in effect, increase the amount of resources that are given to LGUs, local government units. Okay, so they had more money now than before as a result of that. And in an executive order issued by President Duterte before he left office, he specified some of the items that are now going to be assigned to LGUs. These are not really new items because this is already mentioned in the Regional Local Government Code of 1991, except that there are some items that are probably not, this item should not be there in the first place. So right now we are reviewing what spending items should be assigned to LGUs, and we are in close coordination with, of course, the leagues of cities, provinces, etc., and of course the Secretary of Local Government. And maybe this question can be asked to Secretary Ben Har later in the. Okay.
Yes, sir. Okay, there is a phone-in question. Phone-in. There is a question that was requested to be asked to Secretary RC. What is the strategy to reach the 50 million PhilSys IDs target by the end of 2022? How will this target be achieved given the current pace of card printing and delivery?
Thank you. Just for context, as of July 8th this year, the total ID that has been printed is about 14 million, and so the 50 million targeted for this year is a combination of physical ID and digital ID. 30 million of those would be in the physical ID. No? Where we are lagging behind is in the production of the physical ID. We have already identified the problems, and our Philippine Statistics Authority and our BSP have been discussing how the way moving forward. No? So we think that is doable. For the also announced yesterday by the President, by the mid next year, the 92 million IDs, which would cover the 5 years old and above, no? Would be completed by mid next year. No? And also for the rest of the year, those before below 5 no? Would also be produced. And also, just to put again also context here, no, that the printing is going to be an annual activity because there are roughly 1.5 million people added every year. No? So it's not going to end, but it will be a continuing exercise. Thank you.
And so I guess another aspect of that success is the effort for digitalization. So maybe we could ask our budget secretary, what are the efforts for digitalization? Maybe we can begin with your department, and if you have other goals for digitalization.
I think Sec Ivan will discuss later the overall strategy on digitalization and the use of technology. But at least on the part of DBM, we want to roll out the budget treasury management system. It is actually an online ledger of all transactions of the government, from planning up to the release of the budget. So you will see the levels of the budget at a given time. You will see the releases, you will see the balances of our budget. So it will ensure transparency in government transactions. And in line with the national ID, I think this will be a good support in providing social safety nets and support to our disadvantaged communities, like the giving out of 4Ps, the giving out of, what is this, resources to our fisher folks and even to our senior citizens.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. And then aside from digitalization, another key word that was highlighted was inclusivity. Could the chairman of the Economic Development Cluster tell us what are the policies, programs that the administration would have towards this goal?
Well, inclusivity means that no one should be left behind, right? So our resources will be, as mentioned, will be focused on education, health, and of course, social protection. We want to make sure that the Filipino child will be given the appropriate education and health care so that he will have a fighting chance to move in the economic ladder. And so we will, I think, as we invest in physical infrastructure, we will continue to invest in human resources. Human resources is, I would consider it as one of our most important assets, because in an aging world, a young population that we have could be an asset because they could be developed as a competent and workforce that could provide us more income down the road.
Thank you, sir. And we actually were able to receive your questions upon registering. So a lot of them were already incorporated in the questions that were asked earlier, but we have a bit of extra time, so I'm going to ask some from specific members. This one is from Ruben Zamora of Metrobank. He asked, which sectors does the new government see as having the highest growth potential that can reap benefits in the short and medium term? Maybe Secretary Pascual? Which sectors does the new government see, the Marcos administration see, as having the highest growth potential that can reap benefits in the short and medium term? Maybe Secretary Pascual and then Secretary Jokno.
The sector that is growing very fast, is that the question?
Highest growth potential.
Highest growth potential and actually growing very fast is the IT IBPM sector. It's growing at the rate of 10 to 15% per annum, and the potential is even greater now with the heightened use of digitalization and online services as a result of the pandemic. So that's the sector we're focusing, one of the sectors we're focusing on in DTI so that we can encourage more locators here to set up their IT BPM backroom operation.
Thank you, sir. And you had earlier,
May I
sorry,
answer?
Secretary Jokno. Yes,
my
sir.
guess is, given the base effect, I think I will bet mining sector will be the fastest growing. From almost near zero, I think it can grow very fast. Okay? Mining.
Mining. Iba po yung mining sa live selling. For those of you who watched that, different yon. Okay, so for earlier, Secretary Pascual talked about MSMEs. There was actually a question from Alan Roy of TR Bank. He asked, this is for Bangko Sentral po, but supporting MSMEs. How will BSP support banks whose primary focus is lending to MSMEs who were the hardest hit during the pandemic?
Okay, we had temporary relief, which was lending to MSMEs qualify as reserves. But that's not exactly a good long-term solution because it makes the banks don't get fair. Some banks that are so specialized and somewhere else may not actually get a reduction in reserve requirements. So in the long run, our view is lower reserve requirements for everybody. Of course, to the extent that when Sec Ben was governor, he was promising single digit before the end of his term, which I suppose is before the end of my term, right? Now, when you look at MSMEs, we central bankers call this a fiscal problem because the, the solution is a guarantee fund where the banks, when they lose money lending to SMEs, do not absorb 100% of the loss. So the question is, okay, how much is the fund? How much is the sharing of losses? By the way, the reason that is that it's the banks that will still make the credit decision. So allocating money for a guarantee fund is the first one. The second one is deciding how much of the loss will be absorbed by the lending bank and how much will be absorbed by the fund. And the third one is how much is the guarantee fee. And that's where the subsidy comes. The guarantee fee will be lower than the actuarial requirements for the fund to break even. And the reason that can happen, of course, is government subsidy. Now, what we don't want is law saying banks must lend X to sector X. Okay, our experience is that's very hard because, for instance, a bank that is just a foreign bank with very few employees doing wholesale, tell them to lend to SMEs. That's actually telling them not to be in the Philippines. Okay, so my point is the best solution is fiscal. The government putting its money where its mouth is, deciding how much funds to allocate to the guarantee fund, and putting in all the safeguards so that we don't insure the dead. Okay, so this is the problem sometimes with guarantee funds. Some loan has already soured, and somehow it's resuscitated and brought to the fund. But there will be experience there, I think, when then Undersecretary of Agriculture Berna Romulo, who eventually became Secretary of Tourism and is now Deputy Governor of Central Bank, the experience is quite good, actually. The guarantee fund that was called another ugly name, Agricultural Guarantee Pool Fund, actually encouraged quite a bit of lending. So with good governance and funding, we can encourage lending to sectors that would otherwise have no access to credit. So it's not just the Philippines. If these funds can be set up and be covered by good governance, we can expand lending to MSMEs.
Thank you, sir. And hello to Deputy Governor Berna Romulo. Okay, so that wraps up our panel. Before we close, however, could we just ask for final words from our distinguished panel? Of course, ladies first. We will start with Budget Secretary Pangandaman.
Thank you. The Department of Budget and Management will endeavor to craft a budget towards the 8th Economic Agenda and economic transformation, towards a sustainable, inclusive, and a budget for prosperity. Again, given that, we will also endeavor to pass the budget on time with the help of our friends from Congress. Thank you.
And let's do it this way, from the other end, Secretary Balisacan.
Okay, the 8-point agenda, doable? That's the often asked question, right? Of course it is, and with all your participation, support of stakeholders, government, we will deliver the Philippine Development Plan as instructed by the President before the end of the year, and will ensure that the President will receive periodic reports on the implementation of this development plan.
And Secretary Pascual?
Well, the private sector is the engine of economic growth. Government is there to provide an enabling environment, and we in the government should help facilitate investments from the private sector.
Thank you. And BSP Governor Felipe Medalla.
Well, the three pillars of central banking are price stability, financial stability, and a secure, efficient payment system. We will guarantee that, do our best to make sure that all those three pillars are strong. But the reason we have those three pillars is to serve the people. So we'll work very hard to expand financial inclusion.
Thank you, sir. And last but not the least, the chairman of the Economic Development Cluster, Secretary Benjamin Diokno.
As the President said yesterday, the state of the economy is sound. So my advice to the private sector is trust your government. We're behind you.
Thank you so much. And with that, we are looking forward to the agenda for prosperity of the Marcos administration. Thank you very much, sirs. And ma'am.
So while they're taking a photo, Yusek Margo,
Yes,
we
sir.
are
Welcome back,
preparing-
Dr. Tony.
Hi. We are preparing for the second panel. And this panel will be on infrastructure and industry. And while the photos are being taken, may we also announce that we are live on PTV4 and live streaming on RTVM, DOF, BSP, all on our Facebook pages. We also have simultaneous interpretation ongoing on BSP Ilocano, BSP Cebuano, and BSP Filipino. So for all of you who are tuned in, if you'd like to listen to this post-SONA economic briefing in other Philippine languages, we have BSP Ilocano, BSP Cebuano, BSP Filipino. Also, we have sign language interpretation ongoing.
So once again, for the first panel, thank you so much to Budget Secretary Amina Pangandaman, Trade Secretary Secretary Pascual, NEDA Secretary Arsenio Balisacan, BSP Governor Felipe Medalla, and the Chairman of the Economic Development Cluster, Secretary Benjamin Diokno.
Big hand for our first panel.
And let us now proceed to our second panel session on infrastructure. And now I will turn over the stage to BSP Managing Director Tony Lambino.
Thank you, Yusek Margo. We are adjusting the name cards or the agency cards on the stage for the second panel. It gives you an idea of what will be coming over the next hour or so. We have DOTR, DOT, DPWH, DICT, DA, and DOE. So if we may request everyone to find their seats once again, we will begin our second panel. Maraming salamat po. To deliver the keynote for panel 2 on infrastructure and industry, may I call on the chair of the infrastructure cluster, Secretary Manuel M. Bonoan of the Department of Public Works and Highways.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Director Tony. Well, on behalf of the Cabinet Cluster on Infrastructure, it is my privilege to present the highlights of the administration's infrastructure agenda in the presence of my esteemed colleagues in the Cabinet of President Ferdinand Bongbong Romualdez Marcos Jr. Other distinguished guests, development partners, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. As we convene today, I would like to reiterate the marching order of the President during his statement of the Nation address yesterday, that under his administration, the infrastructure development program will be pursued relentlessly. We will continue what has been started under the Build, Build, Build program of the past administration and must not only continued, but whenever possible, be expanded. As the President said, the infrastructure program will be very vital to support national government efforts to push the revival of economy which has slumped due to COVID-19 pandemic. This is the foundation that we will build upon. As the President pronounced, we must keep the momentum and aspire for build better, more, PBM, and faster. The infrastructure projects that are ongoing and even those in the pipeline set for implementation will surely be the priorities of this administration. The idea is to hasten project implementation, finish the projects at the earliest possible time so that the Filipino people may reap its benefits immediately, especially at these crucial times when unemployment remains a dilemma by many. Also, in the line of government's goal to modernize the country's infrastructure backbone, the sustained rapid growth attract investments and spread economic opportunities for all Filipinos. Consistent with the spirit of unity, we will further strengthen and expand the convergence programs of government agencies in order to optimize the use of resources and maximize the direct and indirect impact of our infrastructure development towards accelerated growth of business and alleviation of poverty in the sectors of tourism, trade and logistics, and most importantly, in agriculture in a comprehensive and integrated manner. We will continue building infrastructure that support the development of priority tourism development, as well as jumpstart the growth of emerging tourism destinations. This should enable areas around the country to better prepare in the resurgence of arrivals of domestic and foreign tourists as the COVID-19 becomes endemic from pandemic. We will build more tourism infrastructure to further enhance the experience and entice tourists to explore and spend more for the benefit of micro, small, and medium enterprises in the localities, creating more jobs and income for everyone. Together with welcoming more travel and tourism activities across the country, we also expect the economic recovery will result to more trade, transport, and logistic activities requiring a wider network of national and local road infrastructure that interconnect economic zones, manufacturing and logistic hubs, and trade centers, facilitating more balanced growth among regions, urban centers, and rural communities. Moreover, the government will further enhance linkages towards seaports, airports, and railway stations to further integrate our infrastructure across modes of transport, supporting all industries across all areas in the country. To ensure food security, the government will be building more inclusive and sustainable farm-to-market roads based on a comprehensive farm-to-market network plan. Also, access the connectivity to priority irrigation areas will be improved. The perennial traffic congestion in highly urbanized areas is a serious problem in the country. The weak connection between the centers of economic activities has been an obstacle to economic development and cause of increasing disparity between urban and rural areas. Expanding the country's highways and expressways network will alleviate over-concentration of population and development in the urban areas and will give way to regional development. The government targets to further increase the country's high-standard highway network and expressways from 510 kilometers to 1,816 kilometers based on the Master Plan of Network Development Phases 1 and 2. Through public-private partnership initiatives, we will continue in our infrastructure program, including but not limited to the Luzon Expressway Network program, to reduce travel from the Ilocos to the Bicol region from 20 hours to 9 hours. We will prioritize the construction of more bridges across Pasig River, Marikina River, and Mangahan Floodway to improve logistics network of Metro Manila. One of the directives of the President is to unite the nation by connecting the islands. We will see to it that the inter-island mega bridges with ongoing construction will be fully completed and will also ensure early completion of detailed engineering design of other bridges. Safe, seamless, and sustainable maritime transportation for the greater mobility and connectivity of people is also a primary focus of government. Modernized ports and facilities will strengthen the country's navigational safety and maritime security. The government will also implement more airport projects that will help cater to the growing passenger demand in the country. With regard to the railway network development in the country, the government aims to improve the total passenger experience in our existing railway lines by implementing capacity expansion and reliability improvement programs with the cooperation of the current and future railway operators. Also, we will prioritize the early completion of ongoing railway projects to further expand the total rail network of the country. We will also prioritize programs and projects that will further accelerate the buildup of digital infrastructure in the country and expand digital technologies and transformation efforts for good governance. The government will intensify its efforts to implement programs that will ensure that the country will have a sustainable, secure, sufficient, accessible energy. And of course, despite all these infrastructure developments, we have to balance progress without compromising the environment. The government will also strengthen its efforts to promote active transport by building more pedestrian infrastructure and bike lane networks. Today, we are taking a huge step forward. Together with my fellow workers in government, we will continue working hand in hand in unity in pursuit of a better nation and continue to foster transparency and accountability, public service for the benefit of our Filipinos. Through this forum, we can get insights from our stakeholders, prime movers in the business and financial industries, and here today to help us tackle the pressing issues, especially in the infrastructure sector, and perhaps identify the best practices and come up with valuable solutions on concerns related thereto. Without further ado, I will no longer take too much of your time so we can formally begin with the forum. May we have a productive day ahead. Thank you very much. Mabuhay po.
Thank you very much, Secretary Badon. If you could stay on stage, please. And yes, wait for the other members of the panel to join you. We move on to the second panel on infrastructure and industry. And for this panel, may I please call on Department of Tourism Secretary Cristina Frasco. Also, we have Department of Information and Communications Technology Secretary Ivan John Uy. Is Secretary Uy around? Oh. Secretary, happy birthday, sir. Pinaghanda po namin kayo ng lunch pero it's gonna be a take-home at the end of the event for everyone. Department of Transportation, Under Secretary Cesar Chavez. Department of Agriculture, Assistant Secretary Arnel de Mesa. And Department of Energy Director Mario Marasigan. Good morning, sirs and ma'am.
Good morning.
I'm sure everyone here today is looking forward to hearing about this administration's infrastructure and industry priorities, especially on key sectors such as agriculture, transportation, tourism, energy, and ICT. So let's go straight to that. And please allow me to begin with a question for Assistant Secretary de Mesa. Sir, what are the measures the Department of Agriculture plans to implement to bring down prices of food commodities? How will the government enable farmers to increase productivity on par with our neighboring countries?
Thank you, Tony. Good afternoon to my colleagues, to our guests, and good morning. So for prices, the sharp increase in prices of agricultural commodities, these are brought about by, number one, natural and human-induced calamities, the lingering effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, and the transboundary diseases such as the African swine fever, the avian influenza, and the fall armyworm for corn. And these are all aggravated by the Russia-Ukraine conflict. And to address these increases, as mentioned by the President yesterday in his State of the Nation address, we will be focusing boosting of our key agricultural commodities, the production of key agricultural commodities. This will be supported by the provision of credit and financial assistance. That's number one. Second is by provision of appropriate technologies. We have all these. And by October, we will be launching the Masagana 150 and 200. We are aiming to increase the production, the productivity of our rice for inbred to a level of 7.5 metric tons per hectare, and our hybrid at 10 metric tons per hectare. So that's why it's called Masagana 150 to claim 150 bags and 200 bags for our hybrid. And we are also focusing in giving out targeted interventions to our farmers and fisher folk. We will continue to digitalize the sector by starting with our registry system, the registry system for basic sector in agriculture. We have about more than 12 million farmers and fisher folk. By digitalizing, we will be avoiding duplication in the interventions, and mostly we will be avoiding leakages in the interventions. And in terms of specific programs, we also would like to build, as part of the infrastructure, the cold examination facility in agriculture. This will be our first border protection so as to prevent the further entry of these transboundary diseases. We want this to be established in Subic, in the Port of Batangas, in Cebu, in Davao, and of course, in Manila International Container Port. And we also would like to strengthen our distribution system. So we should establish regional food hubs. And of course, in the establishment of these food hubs, we want to establish the link from these efficient distribution systems to our Kadiwa centers. And by establishing this, we will be reducing the cost of inputs as well as eventually the cost of prices. Next will be the tapping of renewable energies for our irrigation facilities, example of which is our solar-powered irrigation systems. This can be easily established in less than a month and up to 3 months for bigger projects. And lastly, we also would like to look at the provincial commodity investment plans and as mentioned by the President, to look at the value chain from production, post-harvest facilities up to the consumer level to determine the gaps and constraints of the different stakeholders in the value chain so we can increase the productivity and therefore lower the production costs and lower the prices. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Asec de Mesa. For Secretary Bonoan, what projects are you most looking forward to completing or spearheading as DPWH Secretary?
Well, I guess the most pressing programs that we will implement is actually to continue with to finish all started projects under the Build program of the previous administration. And so that these projects will be useful to the economic recovery program of the government at this time. Secondly, we will start with high-impact projects that will continue to improve the transportation system throughout the country and especially to address transport or traffic bottlenecks in the urban areas as well as along the interregional connections for more unimpeded travel to the areas. And the third one is actually, as the President has mentioned, we have to develop our linkages with the other government agencies, as I mentioned, under the convergence program to support all the projects that align under this administration, including tourism, Department of Agriculture, most especially for the food production, food security program of government. And we will continue actually to entice the private sector to continue with our public-private partnership program in addressing actually all the necessary transport programs that are viable for the private sector. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Bonoan. For Secretary Frasco, prior to the pandemic, the tourism industry was one of the key contributors to sustained growth of the Philippine economy with a 12.8% share of GDP in 2019. What are the administration's strategies to support the sector's recovery and bring back its growth to pre-pandemic levels?
Thank you for that question. Mayong buntag kaninyong tanan. Good morning.
Mayong buntag.
First of all, we are very happy that the President has set a very clear vision for the recovery of the tourism industry and has expressed great confidence in its ability to recover from the ravages of the pandemic and the various calamities that have befallen our country. In line with the vision of the President for the tourism industry to become a major pillar in our country's national post-pandemic recovery, we have outlined 7 main objectives that we would pursue under the Department of Tourism to be able to ensure not only that we would reclaim our previous position in the ASEAN and in the community of nations, but that we would exceed it, and for the Philippines to claim a primary standing in the global stage that is the birthright of every Filipino. These main objectives include, first, an improvement in infrastructure as well as accessibility in relation to tourism destinations. Second, a cohesive and comprehensive digitalization and connectivity. Third, an enhancement of the overall tourist experience, studying closely the tourist life cycle to examine how we can best improve from end-to-end usage. Fourth, a diversification of our present tourism portfolio to explore multidimensional tourism. Fifth, an equalization of tourism, marketing, and product development opportunities, not only to well-known tourist destinations, but including and especially those that have not yet been given equal attention in areas across the Philippines. Next, we have the efforts that we will be giving to ensuring close local government coordination as well as close coordination with our tourism stakeholders, recognizing that the tourism industry's recovery simply will not be able to succeed without the help of local governments, without the help of the private sector. In our view, it's also very, very important for us to ensure that we examine all existing strategies that have been set in place, continue the good programs that have been implemented, and introduce innovations and strong coordination with tourism-enhancing government agencies and the national government, overall, to be able to ensure that we build a strong foundation for the tourism industry so that it becomes resilient against any crisis.
Thank you very much, Secretary Frasco. On transportation, Undersecretary Chavez, many are excited about the rail projects connecting key provinces and cities in Metro Manila, including the Mega Manila Subway. Could you share with us the status of some of these projects, please?
All right. Thank you, Tony. Actually, the President mentioned yesterday in his SONA his 4 plus 2 plus 1 railway projects. One is the subway. Metro Manila Subway, it's 33 kilometers from Valenzuela all the way to Ninoy Aquino International Airport, around 17 stations. We expect to provide daily ridership of from 400,000 daily to as high as 800,000 daily. What is the status of this project? The procurement of I'd like to define it in at least 4 indicators. One is the procurement, second is the design, third is the ROW, a very important topic for everyone, and of course, construction. As to the
ROW
procurement,
is right of way, Undersecretary.
ROW is right-of-way acquisition. On the procurement of contractors, from project management consultancy to contractors, civil works, rolling stocks, electromechanicals, including the development of stations, we are about 60%. 60% depends on the procurement both of the project management consultancy and contractors. On the North-South Railway project that is from Calamba to Clark, 147 kilometers, 35 stations, daily ridership we expect, if it is to be operational by 2026 to 2027, is around 400 to as high as 700,000 every day. Project status, procurement, 93% procured. Consultancy and contractor from Tutuban to Malolos. Malolos to Clark, 93% of the contractor have been procured already, both design and civil works, including the rolling stock and the station development. From Manila to Tuban to Calamba, that's about 61% in terms of procurement of consultancy and contractor. As to the detailed engineering design, we're more than 70% complete. As to ROW, it's 55 to 60% in this area. Now, the President also made mention of the Line 1 extension project. This is from Baclaran to Bacoor, about 8 stations, 11.9 kilometers. This is 70% completed in terms of construction. I should correct myself, around 69% in terms of construction. The 123 trains are there already, less than about 24 rolling stocks. The station developments are in place already, except from Las Piñas to Bacoor. And the President also made mention of our development partner, San Miguel, in particular MRT-7. We hope to, this is about 61% completed in terms of construction. Daily ridership here is from 400,000 to as high as 700 to 800,000 a day. On top of this, the President made mention of the common station. This is the Grand Central Station connecting LRT Line 1 and MRT Line 3 and MRT 7 and Subway. We expect, if this is completed by second quarter of 2023, we expect at least 150,000 passengers daily papasok at lalabas in this common station. The President made very important announcement yesterday, and that is the inclusion of the Cebu Railway System, the Panay Railway Project, in the Mindanao Railway Project. I'll start with Mindanao Railway Project. We will have to resubmit this project to the NEDA in the coming few weeks, because this has been already approved in the past. The intention is to continue. Whether we're going to PPP or ODA, we will leave it to the Department of Finance and to the Department of the NEDA and the economic team of the President. However, the Panay Railway Project is not in the master plan. Good news for Cebuano, because in the master plan of Cebu Transport in 2018 to 2019, there are 5 railway projects identified for the development in Visayas, in particular in Cebu province. So these are the status of the projects, Tony.
Thank you very much. So that's the subway, the Line 1 extension, the MRT-7, the common station, Cebu, Panay, and Mindanao Railways, and the North-South Commuter Railway. Yeah, thank you, sir. For the Department of Energy, sir, what is your assessment, Director Marasigan, of the current energy situation of the country? Reducing energy costs is part of the agenda of the Marcos administration. What is the department's game plan to help achieve this goal?
Thank you very much, Tony, and good morning to all. Yes, at the moment, we have sufficient supply of energy, both in terms of liquid fuel and the power industry. But we all know that the cost of energy in the country is dictated by imported fuels. As such, the Department of Energy's goal is to reduce energy cost through the following. Number one, exploitation of our indigenous resources, not only the renewable energy, but also the aspiration to find additional malampay gas. Second, we have to push for more energy efficiency concept. And we can reduce our dependence from imported fuel if we can have a shift of our fuel sources. In support as well with the Department of Transportation's mass transportation system, then we can introduce electric-driven locomotives rather than the conventional transportation system. We can also introduce the e-vehicle program. So we use more of the renewable energy that we have in terms of the electric power industry and lessen our dependence from our fuel sector. But definitely, we need the cooperation of the consumers, the public sectors, and we can achieve this through empowering them. And how can we do that? We have now choices for the electricity consumers to engage in direct contracting with the suppliers of energy themselves. We have programs on retail competition and open access wherein consumers can now buy or procure electricity supply directly from the producers themselves, the power generation through the retail electricity suppliers. And focused on renewable energy, we have the Green Energy Option Program. And we also have the directly connected customers, which are connected to the transmission system. And lastly, we are pushing for more distributed energy, wherein the consumers themselves can put up their own generating facilities. That is also in pursuance of our net metering program. So it's a form of livelihood on their part, but at the same time, we conserve energy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director Marasigan. Some of you may find it strange that I was crouching in front of the speaker. Secretary Popo Lotilla is on the phone, and he said he could not hear the answers. So I had to bring the phone to the speaker so he could hear and to see if he wanted to add anything. Anyway, in this age of a great digitalization, we are finding an analog solution to this problem of not being able to patch in Secretary Lotilla. So Secretary Popo, is there anything you would like to add?
Thank you, Tony, and thank you, Director Mario Marasigan. I just wanted to emphasize that as the President pointed out, we need to be more energy secure. And that means that we have to develop our indigenous resources. And the first one that we have lost, the President said we have less power than we need. And that's because we lost 1,200 megawatts of Ilihan, which is powered by natural gas. So this is a top priority for us. The President has directed that we address the uncertainties over investments in the upstream so that we can mobilize the natural gas around Malampaya and in other fields for our needs at the soonest time possible. So we will do that through a number of measures. One, through executive action, clarifying the policy. Second, in order to stabilize the investment regime, to have the clarification by Congress as well. So it is important to note that, as Director Marasigan pointed out, on fuel, we are 100% dependent on imported fuels. In power, 45% of our power plants are dependent on coal, And 80% of that coal is coming from foreign sources. So we've got to address the security and as we addressed as well, the matter of protecting the most vulnerable sectors of society. And we will continue to work on the targets for electrification of households all over the country. There are still more than 1 million households which are unserved, and more than 800,000 of those are in Mindanao. But why is there reason for hope, as he pointed out? He pointed out to the potential, for example, of diversifying our energy sources. For power, that includes the 28 gigawatts or 28,000 gigawatts of offshore wind that can be mobilized by 2030, and an even much bigger potential for offshore wind. And the future technologies like hydrogen, nuclear solutions, and so on will have to be worked on along the way. So the challenge is for us to start working on this. Otherwise, a future is not going to come. We have to start now. The future starts with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretary Lutilia. So maybe we'll keep him on the line, sir, if that's okay, to join Director Marasigan for the DOE questions for the second round. So now we move to our second round of questions, if that's okay with the panel, and go back. I'm sorry, before that, I think we still have a question for Secretary and our birthday celebrant, Ivan John Uy. Secretary, what are the efforts that DICT is undertaking to support e-government initiatives?
Thank you, Tony, for the greetings. And by the way, food is on the house. Well, the DICT has a pretty broad mandate. Our task really is to be an enabler on the part of, if we're talking about e-governance, to assist all the different departments to get its information system not only running, but efficiently and be able to deliver public service in a more in a more accessible as well as more efficient way of delivering that public service. My analogy here is it's like a human body. We have the Department of Tourism as the face, and it always has to be a beautiful face. That's why we have beautiful secretaries of tourism. Secretary Christine here, and of course Secretary Byrne there. And you know, we have the legs. The legs is the Department of Transportation. We have the muscle, that's the Department of Defense. We have the arms, that's the Department of Labor. And so the function really of the DICT in terms of e-governance is we are the neural network. We're the ones that connect all the different parts of the body just to make sure that all of them are coordinated, that information is transmitted properly between each and every part so that we can work as an effective single unit. And those information is provided to the brain, where the president up there can make sound and informed decisions based on the information that is sent to him from all the different parts of the body. So I'm not a doctor, but I think that's the closest thing I could think of the role of information technology as an enabler in terms of e-governance.
Thank you very much, Secretary Uy. If we can move on to our second round of questions. If you're wondering in what order we're asking the questions, we actually checked in with protocol, and it's by year of establishment of your department. So we go back to the Department of Agriculture. ASEC de Mesa, How will agriculture be different under the Marcos administration? What is your vision for the Philippines agricultural sector over the next 6 years?
Thanks. Thank you, Tony. That's a very good question. What's exciting and great about the President being also our Secretary of Agriculture is the importance and priority now that's being given to the department. And one credible answer to that is that Secretary Pangandaman earlier mentioned that DA will now be given as one of the priority for the increase in budget allocation. For the past how many years, DA is only receiving 1 to 1.5% budget allocation, despite the department producing 10% of the GDP. And we're very happy that with the sufficient budget allocation now that will be given to the department, we'll be providing more services to our farmers and fisher folk. Another one is that the President has mentioned that we'll now be focusing on the development of the farm to market road network plan. There is about at least 70,000 kilometers that need to be concreted all over the country to bring efficient distribution system, to reduce down the prices of basic commodities all over the country. And currently now, we are into the development. We have developed the National Agriculture and Fisheries Modernization and Industrialization Plan. This is a 10-year master plan of the department that we need to focus on in strengthening value chain, efficient, resilient agriculture. So we are also be providing now more appropriate technologies to our farmers and fisher folk. And because of the Mandanas-Garcia ruling, we have what we call the province-led agriculture and fishery extension system, bringing the extension closer to our local government units. The department will bring the technology, but it will be the local government units who will provide the immediate support to our farmers and fisher folk. So with all of this, we are expecting a robust productivity for our farmers and fisher folk, Tony. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Asek de Mesa. On Public Works and Highways again, Secretary Bonoan, what are the next key steps in the government's plan to decongest Metro Manila, given that the mobility restrictions related to COVID-19 have been eased?
Well, for Metro Manila, I think the most pressing problem is traffic congestion problem, and I think it would be really incumbent upon also the Metro Manila Development Authority and other local government units. Management of traffic is going to be a very important role of the local government units. And as far as infrastructure program is concerned, we will continue with the construction of more bridges across Pasig River and Marikina River so that the mobility will be enhanced from north to south sectors, because there are just but a few bridges connecting the north and south sector, although the department has already built a few more. But we will continue with the construction and development of I think another 5 or 6 bridges across the Pasig River. Having said that, anyway, I think what's the more important aspect is actually to continue with the development of the expressways that would be leading towards the other areas of Metro Manila. Right now, I think there are several expressway projects that are online, and I know some of them would be, there is an expressway that is going to be developed in the eastern corridor of Metro Manila that will go through Pasig, Cainta, and all the way to Bulacan. And this is already being implemented. I think I would like also to say that the continuation of the South Luzon Expressway going to Lucena is now underway. And this will be completed in the shortest possible time. And of course, the other expressways that are now being implemented would be the Cavite-Laguna Expressway and all the way to Tagaytay City. All these are actually going to be implemented for Metro Manila. Of course, we will continue to maintain all the national roads, the vital road links in Metro Manila, of course.
Thank you, Secretary Bonoan. So on Metro Manila traffic congestion, we're looking at the role of LGUs. We're looking at more bridges that will connect the north and south sectors and the role of expressways in and out of the metropolis. Thank you, sir. Yeah. On tourism, Secretary Frasco, as the travel industry recovers, what are the department's long-term strategies to promote sustainable tourism and help enterprises transition to a greener, more resilient, and pandemic-proof tourism industry?
Well, first of all, I think it's very important to acknowledge that sustainable development as a concept does have a tendency to be disconnected to actual implementation on the ground by the very nature of it being quite theoretical. From my local government experience, it has taught me that it's very, very important to be able to translate these theoretical policies into actual implementation. And how we are looking to do that is to be able to introduce sustainable development policies into a wider sustainable development framework that looks at economic policy, environmental policy, and social policy. To be able to translate these policies into actual implementation, we need to focus on two essential building blocks. First, the strengthening of local government unit participation in policy crafting and grassroots implementation. Second, to be able to build consensus in the community as far as what policies would be implemented so that they can take ownership of the implementation of these policies on the ground. Overall, the intention being to expand the life cycle of every tourist destination. On the part of the local government units, from my experience as mayor of the municipality of Liloan, Cebu, it's very, very important to institutionalize zoning and land use regulations in that we strictly implement the regulation of the development and the use of tourism destinations to ensure that its use as a tourism destination lasts for the long term and expands rather than deprives the community of economic opportunities, knowing that without taking care of these tourist destinations, we simply cannot expect its sustainability in the future. It's also very, very important to incentivize sustainable tourism policy implementation. The introduction of incentives for the private sector who would implement green policies that give value to preservation of the environment as well as the introduction of measures that promote environmental protection, energy efficient usage, and the like. It's also very, very important to continue to harness the relationship with the private sector, especially in the grassroots, for the adoption of sustainable development, not only as a policy and theoretical notion, but rather as a way of life, so that eventually sustainable tourism is not only a matter of government regulation, but rather of self-regulation, in that the community takes an active part in the implementation of all of these policies. it's also very important to our mind that President Marcos has very clearly laid out the importance of enhancing the Filipino brand. In that, we inculcate among the Filipino people and encourage among them pride of place, that they may take ownership of taking care of their communities and of projecting to the world the unique Filipino brand that is anchored not only on the beauty of our natural resources, but also, most importantly, on our rich cultural heritage.
Thank you very much, Secretary Frasco. So making sure sustainable development concepts are implemented on the ground, taking a wider view of policy that includes economic policy, incentives for green investments, and making sure that local communities are involved in all of this and that the Filipino brand is grounded in Filipino identity. Thank you, Secretary Frasco. For the Department of Transportation, Undersecretary Chavez, what infrastructure projects will the department prioritize to improve economic resilience and make growth more inclusive and sustainable?
The President made a very clear presidential directive in his State of the Nation address yesterday. Quote, "My instruction to the DOTR is simple: full speed ahead," unquote. Immediately after that, Secretary Jimmy Bautista texted me, unquote, "That is our marching order and we will deliver," unquote. I think we will be able to help the Department of Department of Tourism, the Department of Agriculture, hand in hand with the Department of Public Works, our older mother agency, and we need the help of DICT and of course, Department of Energy. We intend, as Secretary Jimmy Bautista said, to complete the North-South Railway Project. By all indicators, procurement of contractors, both management consultancy and contractors, is 90%. ROW, right-of-way acquisition, substantially acquired and delivered, 80%. North-South Commuter Railway, Calamba to Clark. And on the Light Rail Transit Authority, that's from Baclaran to Cavite, the highest passenger when I was the deputy administrator was 550,000. With the completion of 8 stations from Baclaran to Bacoor, we expect additional 300,000. That means from Bacoor all the way to Caloocan to North Avenue stations, that's 800,000. And I think we will be able to complete the project in 3 to 4 years. The President made mention of MRT-7 with development partners, MRT-7. We expect that this project will be completed 2025, 2026, latest 2027, 60% plus the construction, the rate of construction completion. We expect also to complete the Line 2 extension from the East Antipolo. And from 232,000 passengers every day, we expect at least 350,000 passengers daily. And we hope to complete this by 2023, second quarter. It's almost done, except for signaling system. The common station, as I have mentioned, about 150,000 passengers daily. Wag ko kayong mag-alala kung bakit 150,000. At the highest, when I was the director for operations of MRT-3, the highest passenger coming in and out of MRT Taft Station is 72 to as high as 80,000. Ito, tatlo na ang common stations. These railway projects, if completed, and we are confident to be completed, will not only help the way of life, the transport, not only in Metro Manila, Southern Tagalog, Central Luzon, including the subway, substantially complete, by 2027, I think will also help not only the transportation, moving people, moving passengers and goods comfortably, safely, in a speedy manner, but also will greatly help the economic activity in this area.
Thank you very much, Undersecretary Chavez. So you mentioned again the North-South Railway, the LRTA, Line 2 extension as well, and the MRT-7, the common station, full speed ahead delivery, advanced stages of procurement in some cases, and you also mentioned the completion of projects between 2023 and the years following that. Yeah, thank you, sir. For the Department of Energy, once again, Director Marasigan, what is the government's plan to encourage investment in the energy sector to help achieve a clean, reliable, cost-effective, and secure mix of energy sources?
Thank you very much again for the question. Of course, we have to address the current concern of our investors, particularly in the renewable energy, that will support our reliable and clean energy sources. And that is to address first the foreign ownership issues in terms of exploration and development of our renewable energy. At the same time, we have to ensure that the renewable energy market provides a conducive environment, that is to strengthen our distribution sector and ensure their timely and appropriate conduct of competitive selection process to make, and that will also provide security in terms of investment. We have also to ensure compliance of our system operator in providing for the ancillary services, because ancillary services is equally important power generation components. As a transition element from the conventional that we have to renewable energy, we have to develop as well our natural gas industry. And as such, we need legislative support in strengthening our midstream natural gas sector and in looking for alternative options for our energy. Then we need also support for the entry of alternative energy sources such as nuclear and hydrogen fuel. Aside from that, we need the private sector not only in providing the supply of energy in the covered franchise area. We need to allow the entry of the private sector in providing access to our remote communities. And we need to pursue our Microgrid Act that will provide a conducive environment for our private sector in providing electricity services in unserved and underserved area. Also, we need to make sure that interconnection is available. We need to see the timely completion of our inter-island interconnection. We're looking forward to the very soon completion of our Visayas-Mindanao interconnection project, the enhancement of the Cebu-Negros-Panay project, as well as the targeted interconnection of Mindoro and Palawan and other off-grid areas. So these are all part of the scenarios that we are looking at in providing a conducive environment for the industry player, particularly in the power sector. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Marasigan. Let me ask our phone-in VIP, Secretary Lotilla, if he would like to add. I am going analog again for this one.
Okay, thank you very much, Tony. And I can only say amen to all that Director Marasigan pointed out. Let me just emphasize that the President in his State of the Nation address pointed out that the need for IPIRA amendments that would allow the Energy Regulatory Commission to play a more effective role in leveling the playing field for investors and to ensure a competitive market, which is a very important role in order to attract investors. The second is the point of strengthening our transmission lines is because we want to avoid the phenomenon of stranded power. Especially we experienced it in Negros Island, where power could not be exported outside of the island, and renewable energy from solar was competing and was edging out geothermal, which put up renewables against renewables. And that's why a better synchronization of plans is important. And finally, that the vision and the plans and for addressing investment restrictions to impactful renewable energy, such as offshore wind, would have to start early. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Secretary Lotilla. So, our last question for the second round, again, is for Secretary Uy. Secretary Uy, for ICT to have a meaningful impact on the economy, jobs, welfare of Filipinos in the coming years, as well as translate to digital inclusion for all, what policy infrastructure and perhaps training can be pursued?
Well, we're actually pushing for an introduction of many more activities, especially on the education side, to build up our digital workforce. As Secretary Pascual has mentioned earlier, the BPO sector is actually a very rapidly growing sector, and it's employing several million already jobs, as well as contributing about $29 billion to the Philippine economy. So we see the sector as a very high growth sector, and the main hindrance there, actually, common complaint they have, is the lack of skilled and talented manpower. Not because we don't have the people, but that the schools are producing the wrong skill sets that they need. So we need to work with the education system in order to build up the necessary skill sets in order to address that need. At the same time, to be competitive, to go back earlier also to the first question, the government has to actually harmonize all the information and all the data that it has, and ensure the sharing of all this information so that we're able to bridge many of the gaps that we're seeing. With this type of activity, we are really pushing for government to move into the digital space, provide access to public service with the intention of providing 24/7 governance with the use of, for instance, artificial intelligence. We would be able to transfer many of the frontline services where you don't really need a person to handle many of these transactions. We can actually do it online, and it lessens the discretion, as the President has often said, and that will definitely lessen the opportunities for corruption. And with the effort also of Secretary Jokno on digital payments, we really definitely have to push for the digital payments and minimize cash transactions in government. That way we also minimize the leakages. At the same time, with the national ID system, we are going to be able to plug many of the lack of verification of the identity of beneficiaries, whether these are farmers or these are beneficiaries through our 4P programs and many other financial assistance that we provide. So that definitely will address our efficiency in terms of governance.
Thank you, Secretary Uy. So in the course of our discussion in this panel, a lot was covered. And so let me just close the session with a few words that are ringing in my head, from everything that's been said. We heard a lot about digitalization. We heard a lot about the use of technology, but also the need for education and high skills in this area. We heard about convergence, integration, interconnectedness. We heard about infrastructure and making sure it's done quickly, full speed ahead. We heard about sustainability and making sure it gets implemented and not just remain theoretical. About the culture of the Philippines and making sure that the Filipino brand is grounded in the Filipino identity. Also, a focus on the vulnerable and the need for policy reform, like what Secretary Lotilla said. So with all of those thoughts and inputs in all of our minds, exciting times ahead indeed in infrastructure and industry. I hope the discussion gave everyone a good preview of the administration's infrastructure and industry agenda and what's in store under the Marcos administration. Please join me in thanking the members of the panel. And I think they'll be taking your picture as you stand up before you go down to your seat. So while the photo is being taken, they will also be preparing for the third panel. The third panel will be on human development and poverty reduction. And for this panel, let me call back on stage Undersecretary Margo Salcedo. She will be moderating this third panel. Okay, and as our panel 2 members make their way back to their seats, you may have noticed this in the middle of the discussion. A very special guest joined us, and as the panel has already closed, allow me to ask all of us, ladies and gentlemen, to acknowledge the presence of the Honorable Sara Z. Duterte, Vice President of the Republic of the Philippines. Welcome, VP Sara. Thank you so much for joining us today. And now I'd like to call back my co-moderator, Undersecretary Margo Salcedo of the Department of Budget and Management.
Thank you so much, Dr. Managing Director Tony Lambino.
Thank you for the promotion.
That was a very thorough discussion.
Yes.
So congratulations on your panel discussion.
Well, it's really the panelists who we should be congratulating.
Yes,
a lot
of
to look
course.
forward to.
So we will now be segueing to the Human Development and Poverty Reduction Agenda. So for those who are tuning in just now to PTV4 or who have just joined the forum, we began with a keynote address by Secretary Benjamin Diokno, and this was followed by the panel discussion of the Economic Development Cluster, wherein we talked about the Socioeconomic Agenda of the President, the medium-term fiscal framework, the Philippine Development Plan, as well as the priorities of the Department of Budget and Management, the Department of Trade and Industry, as well as the various policies of the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. And then Managing Director Tony Lambino moderated the second panel, wherein he discussed
the industry and infrastructure priorities of the Marcos administration. And now we've come to our third and last panel, which will highlight human development and poverty reduction.
And so we begin this session with a keynote to be delivered by the chair of the Human Development and Poverty Reduction Cluster, Secretary Erwin Tulfo of the Department of Social Welfare and Development.
Members of the Diplomatic Corps, Honorable Vice President and Secretary of Department of Education, Sara Duterte, ma'am, Secretary of Finance, Secretary Benjamin Diokno, Bangko Sentral Governor Dr. Felipe Medalla, the rest of my colleagues in the Cabinet, fellow civil servants, our media friends, ladies and gentlemen, a pleasant morning to all. With the new administration's aim to reduce the country's poverty rate to 9%, it is critical to ensure a strong human development and poverty reduction agenda which aims to improve the quality of life of our kababayans, or the Filipino people, through a broad-based and inclusive approach to public service delivery. With the ongoing pandemic, poverty reduction will prove to be a greater challenge than it has ever been. However, with the concerted efforts of all agencies engaged in human development and poverty reduction, rebuilding the social fabric should be a priority by executing a plan for a transformation that will achieve more sustainable development and rebuild communities. Delivery of accessible and affordable goods to all Filipinos by increasing farm productivity and income, we mitigate hunger and malnutrition, ensuring that healthy food is always on the table for every family to help guarantee children's growth and becoming productive citizens. It is also essential to strengthen health system through progressive realization of universal health care with focus on health system integration, human resource for health, health financing, and health information system. Further efforts to reduce adolescent birth rates are to be sustained and prioritized to counter health, social, and economic implications that affect the well-being of mother and child due to unforeseen pregnancy at an early age. Urgent action is needed to strengthen our mental health program and mainstream mental health and psychosocial support, especially for children. The World Health Organization noted that majority of the people living with mental health problems in the low and middle income countries do not get adequate treatment. The ongoing COVID-19 pandemic has increased our challenges multifold, which need to be addressed immediately. We need to develop a robust school education system that will help build a knowledgeable society and lay the foundation of a strong nation. This entails improving the quality of education, capacity building for teachers, and implementing catch-up programs to address learning losses and build on learning gains from pandemic. Further, amending the CHED law has to be looked into. We need to ensure the Philippines' tertiary education remain at par with ASEAN and global standards, and at the same time widen its access for the poor and vulnerable. Moreover, it is crucial to improve the provision of technical and vocational education and training, or TVET, through the development of targeting upskills and retooling programs that are aligned with the National Industrial Strategy and Fourth Industrial Revolution. based on sector industry needs, and fast-tracking the implementation of micro-credentials for lifelong learning in TVET. We need to provide every Filipino a chance to take up higher learning and training, especially during these trying times. Moreover, strengthening community-driven development is imperative. Sustainable strategy to enhance capacity, increase local ownership by helping communities to identify and prioritize their needs and develop and implement community development plans. The CDD approach ensures the development priorities are addressed in a participatory, collective, inclusive, and demand-driven way. It is designed to give communities control of resources to address local poverty and build the capacity of both state, including local governments, and civil society stakeholders to provide assistance and respond to calls for support from poor communities as they implement development initiatives. We need to transform existing social protection programs to be adaptive and shock responsive. While most social protection is designed to provide assistance to households experiencing shocks as a result of life cycle events such as loss of jobs, illness, or death, shock responsive social protection instead focuses on shocks that affect a large portion of the population. It encompasses the expansion of routine social protection programs and systems to cope with changes in context and demand following large-scale shocks. In this way, social protection can complement and support other emergency response interventions. We should harmonize profiling and targeting systems for the vulnerable Filipinos. To implement policies and social protection programs in an effective and timely manner, PSA, in cooperation with the concerned stakeholders, should develop a registry of vulnerable groups, which will include unemployed OFW returnees, displaced farmers and fisher folks, especially the street children, older persons, persons with disabilities, workers in the informal economy, and those affected by the pandemic and development interventions. Harmonized system that will generate updated, disaggregated data necessary in targeting beneficiaries. Conducting more comprehensive poverty analysis and needs prioritization. Designing appropriate policies and interventions and monitoring impact over time. This initiative will consider integrated data from the community-based monitoring system, listahanan, and other existing registries to institutionalize a social protection floor. The said registry will also be configured to be interoperable with the PhilCs. Multiple information systems exist as they were developed to meet business processes and requirements whenever needs arose. As a result, each program has its own system. The lack of interoperability and integration among different programs is a major challenge to efficient business processes and digital data governance. Thus, digital transformation is essential for us to adopt a cutting-edge digital technologies and platforms for efficient service delivery. As the primary counterpart of the national government agencies at the local level and being the first respondent and provider to people's needs, it is vital that synergy is horizontal and vertical coordination remains a primary strategy to guarantee actualization of programs and services. In this endeavor, we need to create an enabling environment by building capacities of LGUs. The national government shall ensure that mechanisms are in place for increasing LGUs or local government units' ability to deliver the services. At the same time, full cooperation and initiative of our partners in the local government is also needed. This agenda might be further solidified by ensuring time-bound implementation of our priorities through working mechanisms such as Human Development and Poverty Reduction Cluster. With priorities already set by the President through recently concluded SONA, it is now time for us to further roll up our sleeves and focus on the serious work of improving the quality of life of our fellow Filipinos, especially the poor, vulnerable, and marginalized. Again, good morning and thank you all.
Thank you so much, Secretary Tulfo. It is our pleasure to have you with us this morning. At this point, may I now call on our panelists to give us an overview of the plans for the human development sector. May I call on our esteemed officials to please join DSWD Secretary Tulfo on stage, led by no less than our Vice President and Education Secretary, Sara Duterte. They will be joined by Department of Labor and Employment Secretary Bienvenido Laguesma. We also have in this panel Department of Environment and Natural Resources Secretary Maria Antonia Yulo Loizaga. And she will be joined as well by the Department of Migrant Workers Secretary Susan Ople. And we also have Department of Health Officer in Charge Maria Rosario Vergere. To our Cabinet Secretaries, Madam Vice President, please take your seats. And if you like, we can also test our mics. So since lunch is approaching, we will begin immediately. And of course, we are so honored to have with us this morning our Vice President. So if it's okay, ma'am, I will begin the panel discussion po with you. At the State of the Nation address yesterday, President Marcos said the Department of Education, led by our highly able Vice President Sara Duterte, is now preparing for its implementation in the upcoming school year with utmost consideration for the safety of students as we are still in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic. We must ensure that our classrooms are safe for teachers, for students, and the entire academic community when they return to face-to-face classes. So ma'am, may we ask, in a few months, 5-day in-person classes are expected to begin. So in line with this, what are the preparations being carried out by the Department of Education?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Maayong buntag sa inyong tanan. We started with the department order on identifying our school calendar and the implementing guidelines for school year 2022 to 2023. In that department order, we already identified the next 2 years period of our school calendars, that of 2023 and 2024 and 2024 and 2025. If there will be no surprises or amendments, these 3 school years will continue on with the following implementing guidelines for the next 2 school years. And then we also released our department order on the enrollment. And I am happy to share with everyone that our enrollment for the first day was 3.3 million already as compared to our first day of last year, which was at 222,000 only. And then we started with the checking of the inventory of the schools who were affected by Typhoon Odette, and where they are now with their repairs and reconstruction of the classrooms and buildings that were damaged by the typhoon. And we already talked to our finance strand in the Department of Education to look for savings from the past year and this year, and requests for the realignment of these savings to the repair and reconstruction of these classrooms and buildings that were affected by typhoons Odette and Agaton. And whatever is remaining from, whatever is lacking from these repairs, we will request the Department of Public Works and Highways to assist the Department of Education. And then we, in the same department order of the school calendar, we instructed our regional offices to coordinate with their regional offices, counterparts of the Department of Health, to continue with the counseling of unvaccinated families, particularly the unvaccinated learners and the teaching and non-teaching staff of the Department of Education that are unvaccinated as well. And once the counseling is successful, they initiate mobile vaccinations in our schools for those who have given their consent to be vaccinated. We also, in the same department order also, we instructed our regional offices to coordinate with their local mental health associations and their psychiatric societies to come up with a support, mental wellness support for our learners who for the past 2 years only knows of the online classroom, and now they are transitioning to our in-person teaching. In the same department order as well, we introduced a transition period for all our schools. We did not directly impose upon them to begin a 5-day in-person classes for their schools. We allowed them to conduct a blended learning mode, which is combined with in-person and distance learning. And then we are set to start our Brigada Eskwela and seek out our partners, private sector partners, and our Adopt a School partners. We intend to start this on August 1. Everyone is invited to join and participate in your respective Brigada Eskwela in your respective localities.
Ang dami, ma'am.
Ang dami
Wala
pang
pang 1
problema,
month?
ma'am, actually. Pero yun na lang muna.
Bravo, bravo. I think that's the benefit of having a former mayor for education secretary, is the crisis response. It's also immediately addressed. And speaking of response, sinabi din po ni, I will speak in Filipino and then translate for our diplomatic corps, because we're also live on PTV4, and the answers of our panel might be direct concerns of some of our viewers. And if I may quote the portion of President Marcos in his State of the Nation address yesterday, which he also delivered in the vernacular. He said, magpapatuloy ang ating pagkalinga sa ating mga kababayan na lubos na nangangailangan. We will continue to care for the poor and those who are in need. Hindi po natin sila pababayaan, mangunguna sa pag-aagapay sa kanila ang Department of Social Welfare and Development. Utos ko sa DSWD ang mabilis na pagtugon sa pangangailangan ng mga biktima ng kalamidad at mga iba't ibang krisis. So the President said that he had instructed the Department of Social Welfare and Development for their speedy response in times of crisis. So Secretary Tulfo, how will we streamline services to ensure that the poor, vulnerable, marginalized, and disadvantaged sectors receive timely social assistance as mandated by the President yesterday? And may we request the Secretary to mention top reforms being carried out to achieve this goal?
Well, we have a lot of programs being implemented now by the department, one of which is digitization of our assistance, actually in coordination or cooperation with the World Bank program that will last until 2025. We're working with them to fast-track the delivery of assistance, particularly financial assistance to the needy and vulnerable. We also have the assistance of individuals in crisis situation where we give out assistance to people in need right there and then. For example, they need burial assistance, medical assistance. We give it to them on the very same day to make sure that what they need, what their business in our agency will be dealt with and will be given to them at a very quick time or that same day. We have other programs and we're still working on it right now, basing on the instruction of the President. So we keep on innovating at this very moment, at this point, to create more substantial programs that will help people immediately.
Sir, ang galing niyo pala mag-English. Because we usually hear the Tulfos on the radio and they speak exceptional Filipino. So nice to speak to you in English, sir. Okay, now we go to the Department of Labor. Secretary Bienvenido Laguesma, what initiatives are in the pipeline that target to increase the employability of the workforce? In what areas can the private sector complement the department's job facilitation programs?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Good noon, everyone. Let me first thank President Bongbong Marcos Jr. for putting workers at the center of this speech. In all of the projects and programs mentioned yesterday, I heard very clearly job creation, employability, social protection for the vulnerable as well as the underserved sector. In the Department of Labor and Employment, we have often heard these issues. Jobs, skills mismatch. We also heard about labor, low labor productivity and capital productivity, as well as underutilization of labor. With the Technical Education and Skills Development Authority reverted to the fold of the Department of Labor and Employment, we will concentrate vigorously in coordination with the other departments who are presently here on the stage to upskill our workers to answer and respond to the needs and requirements of emerging as well as growth industries. And what are these growth industries that we have actually identified? Based on labor market studies, we have seen manufacturing, we have seen services, agriculture, tourism, construction, as well as the information technology and business processing outsourcing sectors. And we have noted that in one of our dialogues with the partners, with our employer sector representatives, specifically, I would like to mention that association because they made a commitment to create 1 million jobs up to 2028 naman. Not next year, not this year. And the Information Technology and Business Outsourcing Association of the Philippines, actually in our dialogue with the leaders led by Mr. Jack Madrid, if you are around, I'm reiterating your commitment that you will be actually targeting to be able to produce 1 million jobs But of course, they also committed that they will be able to produce more with total and complete government support. And we are committed to be able to produce, to help them provide the necessary support. In fact, we have mentioned about the review of the implementing rules and regulations of the Telecommuting Act. And a technical working group is already working on it. And we will actually come up with our proposal on the amended IRR, but we will always do consultation with our sectors, the affected sectors. And in addition, I think we'd like to really have our initiatives focus also on what we call the special program for the employment of students, as well as the Job Start, to be able to hone up also the skills of our youth and prepare them for better, probably work arrangement in the workplaces. In addition, we'd like to also make use of the Public Employment Service Offices, the PhilJobNet, which is a computerized system of looking for jobs. All in all, we'd like to be able to have job facilitation, have also the concept of ease in doing business be really implemented and enjoyed. Because, you know, creation of jobs actually would be done largely by the private sector. And we would like to really work in tandem with them together with our different secretaries of the department. And the other thing is that we'd like to aggressively promote greening of jobs in coordination with the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, because we believe that we are able to address the issues on climate change. We'll be able to produce not just more jobs, but also quality jobs. So these, in essence, are the things that we'd like to do. But in addition, while we do these linkages and initiatives, we will not forget that the vulnerable sectors and the underserved sectors of our community, our population, will also be provided equitable social protection. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Secretary Laguesma. So if the Economic Development Cluster has build, Secretary Laguesma over at the Department of Labor has jobs. And the jobs are not confined to the jobs in the country because we also now have a Department of Migrant Workers. And so first, Ma'am Secretary Susan Ople, may we ask, what is your message to overseas Filipino workers now that the Department of Migrant Workers has been created to serve their needs?
Thank you for the question, and thank you, Secretary Diokno and your team for convening this Post-SONA event. To our OFWs, I think the President's message is so clear. We could feel, yesterday we felt his sincerity, his highest esteem for our OFWs, and his compassion that extends not just to the worker but also to the family of the worker. And so we can only build upon that message by delivering on the programs and services that were enumerated in the SONA yesterday. For example, on ease of doing business and digitalization, what we would like to cut is the number of months that it normally takes for a foreign employer to go to one of our embassies and express an intention to hire a Filipino worker. Because when I assumed office, I discovered that it would take a minimum of 3 months for such an employer to work with our embassy and the office of our labor attaché to get an accreditation. It's not even the hiring process, it's just the accreditation process. So we looked at the number of steps and we found a lot of redundancies. And so by doing away with all those redundant procedures and unnecessary requirements, even the number of signatures, we are confident that we can cut that timeline from a minimum of 3 months to perhaps less than a month or 3 weeks. We are also looking at the complaints of so many OFWs that when they spend their vacation here in the country, a huge chunk of it is spent on going to the POEA to physically apply and obtain what we call the Overseas Employment Certificate, or OEC. The OEC is what a worker, an OFW, presents to the Bureau of Immigration at the airport so that he or she can leave without being offloaded, because it shows the legitimacy of his or her being an OFW. With the help of the DICT, and I see the Steve Jobs of the cabinet here, Secretary Ivan Uy, the DICT and the DMW will be working closely together so that the OEC will now be paperless. It can be stored in the worker's phone, and there will be a corresponding digital solution at the immigration, so that in every international airport that we have in the country, it's now seamless. So they just need to present the OEC that's stored in their phone. And all requirements can be submitted electronically, which spares them the inconvenience of going to the POEA every time they are here on vacation. On welfare, as you may all have heard, we are resuming talks with Saudi Arabia on the deployment of our skilled workers. That's the hierarchy. We will resume talks on the deployment of skilled workers. And then second, we will discuss a bilateral labor agreement with enhanced safeguards for our domestic workers, and then perhaps another agreement covering cleaners and other vulnerable workers. So at the heart of all these talks with other countries, with our partners, it will always be the welfare and the rights of the OFW at the heart of it, because that is what the President wants. Also, we are looking at, and I know we have the leaders of the business community here. We are the Department of Migrant Workers, as young as that agency is. We would like to invite all of you, the members of the business community, even the diplomatic posts that are here, and international organizations. Please help us put in or define as many reintegration pathways for our returning OFWs to cut the cycle of intergenerational labor migration. We need your help so that, you know, it's not just government moving, but in tandem with the private sector, we have a lot of talented overseas workers returning to the country in search of possible investments, also local employment, and even partnerships for business and even social programs that they can join you in your CSR projects, for example. So these are just snapshots of what we want to do. We also want to strengthen our campaign against illegal recruitment and human trafficking. And we want to care for the children of OFWs, the children being left behind. And we are opening a special program for that as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. So we hope that that resonated with all the ambassadors and heads of corporations in the House, so that we can partner for our overseas Filipino workers. And also, I think this is in line with the message of President Duterte yesterday of making the Philippines an investment destination, and also in line with the objectives of the Department of Labor for jobs, jobs, jobs. So we will now move on to the Department of Health, which was also emphasized by healthcare is another objective of the President, as he mentioned yesterday in the State of the Nation address. And he said, and if I may just read this, it's in the vernacular, sa ating sitwasyon ng pangkalusugan, Nariyan pa rin ang banta ng COVID-19, lalo't may mga nadidiskubreng bagong variants ng coronavirus. Pero hindi na natin kakayanin ng isa pang lockdown. Wala na tayong gagawing lockdown. Essentially, President Marcos yesterday said that there will be no more lockdowns amidst the pandemics. So, Ma'am Vergere, may I ask, how is the government strengthening the public healthcare system in response to President Marcos's message yesterday to prepare for future global emergencies in the near term?
Yes, thank you, and good noon to all of you. In response to the President's directives, we've discussed this with him that yes, there won't be any lockdowns anymore. Everybody has to shift the mindset that we are all living with the virus. And therefore, we need to shift also the value that we give to the number of cases versus the system's capacity of our healthcare. So if we observe right now, our cases are continuously increasing, but in spite of the continuous increase in the number of cases here in the country, we are seeing that the severe and critical cases are plateauing, meaning it's not going or it's not increasing, and our hospital admissions are not also increasing. Though there are areas in the country right now that we are closely monitoring because we are having increase in the number of admissions, but upon checking and upon analysis, we are seeing that because the admissions are because they have low number of beds that had been allocated for COVID-19. So with this kind of situation, we are one and of course supports the call of the President that there won't be any lockdowns anymore, and that in the future and eventually we will be able to prepare our healthcare system whereby we are more resilient and we are going to be prepared if in case there would be another pandemic of this scale. So first, we would like to improve the health literacy of all Filipinos. During this time of the pandemic, we have noted that many of our Filipinos or many of our citizens were just passive beneficiaries of the response that we've had. So it means that we would like to make them more health literate by being active participants to this response, by joining the government in the response, and of course, changing behavior as well, so that we can be able to battle the next pandemic if in case we will have another one. The second one would be, of course, we'd like to base all of our decisions with evidence and data. And therefore, we are going to have these strengthened epidemiology and surveillance units all over the country. And that is already part of the budget that we have proposed to the Department of Budget and Management for the Department of Health, so that we'll be able to use science as basis for actions for our local government units. The third one would be for us recommending to have this evidence generation, and these recommendations should be coming from experts in the field, coming from scientists from the field. And we all know that the Department of Health would not have this kind of expertise. That's why during this time of the pandemic, we had expert groups helping us and providing us with guidance and recommendations. But in support of the directives of the President, we are going to have the Philippine Center for Disease Control, whereby we are going to have high-level technical capacity, hiring experts, hiring scientists, so that we can be able to better manage emerging and re-emerging diseases. The next one is for us to have this dynamic provision of healthcare services, not just relying on the usual that we have right now, but gearing more on technology and innovations. Like we're going to establish further our telemedicine services or our telehealth services so that we can continuously decongest our facilities and we can also reach those far-flung areas in the country. Aside from that, strengthening our facilities as what the President mentioned yesterday in his SONA, that we will have these specialty care facilities in different regions of the country, as well as our primary care facilities, having this network of primary care facilities and higher level facilities so that access of the people will be improved. Another one would be for us to be able to have this dynamic provision of services, there should be a medical reserve corps. And this is what the President mentioned yesterday, that if there are emergencies or this kind of pandemic of this scale, there should be a pool of medical personnel that we can easily tap from and that they can easily supplement the different needs for healthcare workers or health human resources across the different facilities of government and the private sector as well. And lastly, of course, we need to facilitate early diagnosis by setting up our public health laboratories. We all know that we have a lot of laboratories in the country, but public health laboratories specifically, which will be focused mainly on the different diseases which are emerging and re-emerging, just like what we've had with COVID-19. And also, being self-sufficient in terms of our logistics and commodities. We all know that our vaccines, for example, for COVID-19, came internationally. We do not have our local source. So in line also with the directives of the President, we are in support to work with the Department of Science and Technology to set up the Virology Institute of the Philippines, whereby eventually we can be able to locally manufacture our technologies such as vaccines for these specific infectious diseases. And lastly, in order for us to be able to implement all of this, we need that governance mechanism that we will have, continue to have, an interagency task force which will be able to manage the first two levels of response for the country and an institutionalized system or organization, the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council, to be implementing all of these policy directions that IATF will be providing to the health sector.
Thank you, ma'am. That's a lot of programs and projects, and we are happy to note that earlier in the Economic Development Cluster panel, our budget secretary said that health has gotten the #2 priority, next only to education, which is constitutionally mandated. So we move now to the Department of Environment and Natural Resources. We have Secretary Maria Antonia Yulo Loizaga. Yesterday at the SONA, President Marcos said that though we are a minor contributor to climate change globally, we have the unfortunate distinction of being one of the most vulnerable countries to the effects of climate change. For the welfare of our people, it is incumbent upon us to alleviate the effects of that vulnerability. So, ma'am, may we ask what are the lessons and best practices that we have gained from the completed rehabilitation projects of the DENR that will contribute to the agenda of establishing livable and sustainable communities?
Thank you very, can you hear me? Thank you very much, Yusek Marco. Let me start also by quoting a few sentences from the President's address as well. The first one, of course, relates to disasters and climate-related disasters at that. The second one really relates to his statement regarding the preservation of the environment is the preservation of life. And in fact, that is the major mother statement in terms of the DNR's mission. Thirdly, he mentioned that those who exploit our natural resources need to follow the law. So in terms of maintaining sustainable and livable communities, the first lesson here is not just to be sustainable, it's actually to be resilient. We actually need resilience in order to keep our cities and our communities safe, but not just our cities, the ecosystems that actually support them. Without that kind of interface between the natural, rural, and urban transect, we will not be able to maintain a resilient and sustainable city. So the first point in terms of the preservation of our urban developments would really be to keep in mind the ecosystems that are supporting them. Many of our cities, in fact, the major metropolitan regions in the country, are coastal or in fact influenced or in fact aided in their development by riverine systems. The first lesson that we must take away is that we must adopt an ecosystem-based approach different from the political and administrative boundary approach in terms of our local governance systems. We need to understand the ecosystems that influence and support the life of our cities sometimes go over the political administrative boundaries that are in place and in fact depend on other LGUs in terms of governance. So the first lesson is ecosystem-based, ridge, river, reef, all the way down from the headwaters until the coast. So many of the lessons that the DNR has learned, for example, are the natural systems rehabilitation programs, particularly for mangroves, for example, in terms of their being able to mitigate the effects of sea level rise, of flooding from storm surge, for example, the dredging of our rivers, but also the maintenance of our rivers using organic and bioremediation interventions. Those, in fact, need to be coupled with the structural interventions that our LGUs and our national governments put in place. I think the President also mentioned integrated water resource management. This is the water that gives life to our domestic use, our industrial use, and in fact will support the development of our cities through energy as well. Without water, cooling of our energy systems will not be possible. So the way we need to approach this is in fact looking at our different sectors and looking at the demand for the kind of sustainability that we would like to achieve, and then planning backwards. We need to reverse engineer at this point because many of our cities are in fact already water stressed. And that sometimes is almost, how do I say, irreversible in some senses because the ecosystems have already been damaged by other types of man-made activities. So I would also venture to say at this point that the private sector plays a very large role in the building of sustainable cities. We all know that urban and regional planning are really the part of the way we manage our land use. And this is where the private sector has a strong influence on the way our cities are shaped, the way investments are made in infrastructure, the way investments are made in the kind of support systems that give life to the metabolism of our cities. So the private sector, through their programs, their core business values, but also through their ESG, their environment, social, and governance programs that are part of their sustainability reporting, need to keep in mind, in fact, that the risk we face, we know from hazards that are already in our past, but there is uncertainty in terms of the climate risks that we face. So we must invest in the plausible, not just in the possible, in terms of building our cities. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. It's very refreshing and encouraging to see that the President is prioritizing the climate agenda. It's very well in line with the global sustainability agenda and even in line with Pope Francis' encyclical Laudato Si. So bravo to President Marcos for that. And speaking of ecosystem, it's wonderful to see the synergy among the different secretaries and the different departments. There's really unity amongst the different cabinet secretaries, different departments. So we'll go back to our Vice President and Education Secretary. The question here is, the President, this is also in line with jobs. So yan po yung ecosystem natin dito. The President has expressed support in the review of the K-12 curriculum to address possible jobs mismatches. What are your plans regarding the K-12 curriculum?
Yes, thank you. Maayong buntag usab sa inyong tanan. Good morning again to everyone. Last July 19, that was our second presentation to the Cabinet and President Marcos for the Department of Education. We included there some of the very big questions with regard to basic education in our country. And one of which was the K-12 program. And in relation to that K-12 program, we sought the permission of President Marcos to adopt the Basic Education Development Plan from the administration of President Duterte and Secretary Briones. In that Basic Education Development Plan, it is already included therein the need to review the K-12 program of the Department of Education. And Secretary Briones already initiated the review of grades 1, kinder to grade 10. And they are about to finish and wrap up and make their report on the review on kinder to grade 10. And my administration will start the review on grades 11 to 12. In grades 11 to 12, I already sought the advice of my newfound friend. We have a very good synergy, Secretary Laguesma of the Department of Labor, who is holding TESDA, because senior high school has a TVET track. And this is one of the big questions with regard to the senior high school program. And we already agreed that there is a need to strengthen and intensify our coordination, particularly in the Philippine Skills Framework, yes, between the Department of Labor and Employment and the Department of Education. So we were given by President Marcos 1 year, this school year 2022 to 2023, to give a final answer about our K-12 program here in the country.
Thank you, ma'am. And so I'd like to follow up with your newfound friend, Secretary Benny Laguesma. In line with that, what are the plans of the Department of Labor on job facilitation and on strengthening linkages between industries, businesses, and training institutions for a more efficient labor market?
Thank you so much for the question. Thank you so much, Inday BP, Sarah, for the compliment. As you are aware, the Department of Labor and Employment treasures and values tripartism, social dialogue, and genuine consultations with the sectors that we serve, namely the labor sector and the employer sectors, as well as the stakeholders. And so we intend to really make these principles operate, because we see the Department of Labor and Employment, as mentioned earlier by Secretary Ivan, the birthday celebrant, as the enabler, the moderator, and probably also the mediator. Because the Department of Labor and Employment has, as all of you might have been aware, 3 major program areas. And these have something to do with labor management relations, namely promotion and maintenance of industrial peace. Social protection, meaning welfare and the protection of the workers, should also be a consideration when we talk with our labor counterparts and the employers' counterpart, because health and safety in the workplaces will always be a principal consideration under the Marcos administration. And finally, we are now seriously focusing on our employment promotion and human resource development role to be able to live up to the expectations that we will be able to help through the private sector, the businesses, the companies, be able to generate decent, sustainable, remunerative, and jobs that can make them stay in the country, not think about overseas employment. I'm sorry. I really would like to look forward. It's a dream. Maybe it's not just my dream, but also the dreams of the people in front of you and my fellow cabinet members under the Marcos administration, that we see the day when overseas employment is certainly just an option, not the principal choice for our Filipino workers, because it has so many social costs. These are the things that my Indai's BP Sara, DSD, the WD Secretary would like to address, and health concerns that, the life and probably livelihood of our the Filipinos, the entire Filipino nation, would actually be just focusing on really uplifting them. You might have noticed the target set at the end of the term of President Bongbong Marcos Jr. Principally, nakita natin yung reduction ng poverty incidence by a single digit. And we the team in front of you would like to really work closely, coordinate in ensuring that this can happen. And there's another target that actually I saw in the speech, which is the per capita income, something like about $4,000. This would be an upliftment of the lives of our workers and their families. And these are the things that the Department of Labor and Employment would like to work closely with the private sector. No? We know that we cannot do it alone. We need the support, cooperation, as well as understanding of the sectors, our constituents that we serve. No? So in everything that we do, we'll always do consultation. We'd like to really look at genuine representation from the sectors that we serve. Hopefully, with this in place, we will be able to accomplish what we have targeted for ourselves. And incidentally, we are now trying to put together, as part of the Philippine Development Plan, a labor and employment plan, which will put together inputs coming from the sectors. No? And basically, this will also address your earlier question on employability, provision of decent work, green jobs, and we have so many dreams. We have so many things in our plate. I just hope that we can digest it and chew it to the satisfaction of the Filipinos that we serve. Thank you.
Certainly, we join you in that dream, Secretary. But while we wait for that dream to come true, we still have a lot of seafarers. So I will go back to the Department of Migrant Workers and ask Secretary Ople. Filipino seafarers are some of the most sought after globally. I was going to say seafarers not only for their magnificent cooking skills and beautiful singing voices. The Philippines has been a top source of seafarers worldwide since 1987. What are your thoughts on supporting our seafarers?
Thank you, Margo. And it's true, it's true that 1 out of every 5 international seafarers is a Filipino. So we're very proud of them. And before the pandemic, you can find in almost, I think in all cruise ships, you'd find a Filipino crew member or a ship officer. Before the pandemic, there were about more than 100,000 Filipino seafarers working for the cruise industry. We hope to be able to recapture some of that excellent numbers and perhaps even exceed that once global tourism recovers. Meanwhile, the request of the manning agencies, the joint manning group that I have talked to, it's almost similar to what the land-based sector would like to see: streamlined processes, quicker deployment times, and also for the seafarers themselves, more capacity building. Out of 300,000 active seafarers, only 22% are ship officers and ship captains. So we want to encourage more of our seafarers to aim higher and try to be more competitive in terms of their desired career aspirations. Meanwhile, for the fishers, those not deployed by manning agencies, who are stranded in countries abroad, as well as perhaps some other seafarers that are also under exploitative conditions, the Department of Migrant Workers has opened the One Repatriation Command Center with a hotline which is 1348, so that stranded seafarers and also exploited land-based workers can just call that number, and the department will facilitate their return to the country and eventual reintegration into the mainstream of society.
That's great. Thank you, ma'am. And in relation to that, one of the reasons why we have also so many OFWs is because they seek greater purchasing power through earning abroad. And so we go to our Department of Social Welfare and Development in relation to inflation. In a recent Pulse Asia survey, just this June, controlling inflation is the top concern of Filipinos. Respondents from Class D and E, Class D comprises 58% and E comprised 62%, identified taming inflation as their utmost concern. Napakataas daw po ng presyo ng ating mga bilihin. In view of this, what programs are you considering to ease the burden of price increases in poor households?
Actually, the government has a solution or a program for every situation or needs of poor Filipinos. We have the what you call the targeted cash transfer program initiated by the former President Rodrigo Duterte. It is a program that subsidizes the poor people, the vulnerable, like 500 pesos a month, for the next 6 months to cushion the impact of the skyrocketing of prices and basic commodities. That's number one. Then we have the Pantawid ng Pamilya Pilipino program, or the 4Ps. It is also a subsidy of the government to poor families, the poorest of the poor. If you have children going to school, you don't have work, or the money that you earn every month is not enough, you can enroll in such a program. The government can start at about 1,500 pesos a month, all the way to about 3,000. Then, if you're not enrolled in that program, there's another program that is called the Sustainable Livelihood Program. It is a program, it is a grant from the government, from the DSWD, if you lost your job, or if you have no income at all, you can come to our agency and apply for the social or a sustainable livelihood program. Then we have the assistance for individual in crisis situation. This is the most common and most known program because people lined up every day for this kind of program. Because you can get, if you don't have money for burial, we can give it to you. If you don't have money to get your relative or your loved ones out of the hospital, we will pay it for you. And if you need to go somewhere, you need to go home to your family, you can come to us, to the DSWD, and apply for this what you call AICS, or Assistance Individual in Crisis Situation. We will give you a fare going home. Or simply, you do not have food that day, you can come to our agency because we will provide you with food. These are just some of the programs of the Philippine government, of the DSWD, that they can ask for, that they can come. There's always a program, a solution for every need of a poor family. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And yesterday at the State of the Nation address, one of the portions that was most applauded was when President Marcos mentioned this: napakinabangan natin ng husto ang malaking specialty hospitals gaya ng Heart Center, Lung Center, Children's Hospital at National Kidney and Transplant Institute. Kaya maliwanag na hindi lang dapat dito sa National Capital Region, kundi maging sa iba't ibang parte ng bansa magkaroon ng mga ito. So he was saying that we should also have the Lung Center, Heart Center, National Kidney Transplant Institute in different parts of the countries. On that note, may I
ask once again, Department of Health, in your view, ma'am, what are the immediate needs that must be addressed to further improve the national health infrastructure? Please share the Department of Health's agenda in line with the goal of having adequate facilities nationwide. I believe you touched on it already a bit earlier. Baka po we could expound on it a little more.
Thank you, ma'am. Yes, we have our Philippine Health Facility Development Plan. This was crafted with the Asian Development Bank last 2020. And primarily, this articulates the medium and long-term plan of the Department of Health for all levels of facilities in the country. First of the objectives would be primary care facilities. That primary care facilities should be accessible within 30 minutes from each of the Filipino families. Second, that these hospitals, or there would be adequate hospital beds that would be accessible within 1 hour from each community in the country. Also, there should be specialty centers that would be strategized to be established in the different areas of the country, different regions like Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao, and eventually we can have it in all of the provinces in the country. Health facilities will be organized into these healthcare provider networks wherein it is not just really one hospital in this network and one primary care, but we will be including the public, the private facilities from primary level to the tertiary level to the specialty care level so that the network for healthcare providers are complete and the access of our patients would be improved. So with all of this, we still have gaps currently. We have a gap of around 3,000 more primary care facilities in the country. We have these inventories where we already have about 3,800, but we still need additional 3,000 primary care facilities. The second one, as to the number of our beds, we still have a gap of around 400,000 beds all over the country for us to be able to be at par with our neighboring countries like Singapore and Vietnam, where they have their number of bed to population ratio already of 1.8 to 4.1. So these 400,000 beds will make the Philippines, with this indicator, 2.7 beds to 1,000, or the population ratio, 1,000 people, no, for this. We also have started a baseline of our 46 specialty centers. So as in support with the President's directives, we already have started actually having this kind of direction and improving our facilities so that they can offer specialty care. So currently, we now have 46 specialty centers, and our objective is for us to be able to have 329 specialty centers by 2025 all over the country. We also have these public health laboratories, as I have explained a while ago, wherein these public health laboratories would really focus on the emerging and re-emerging infections like that what we have right now with COVID-19, and now we have monkeypox. So these public health laboratories, we now have one reference laboratory, and that is our RTVM, and we have 6 subnational laboratories all over the country. But that would still be lacking. So we have now a total of 7, and we are aiming that we will have around 30 of these public health laboratories eventually by 2030. And with all of this, we can see that the Department of Health has been utilizing the taxes coming from tobacco and the other sin products since 2014. And this is mainly part of our budget right now. 59% of our budget for 2022 has been taken from these sin taxes. And we intend to use these sin taxes still pursuing these objectives for our health facilities. We also would like to encourage our private sector into helping the government and the Department of Health to have these facilities. So we intend to have our framework set in that direction where that the funds would only be used for those areas with low capacity so that we can attract more private sector counterparting or private sector investments in that area. And also utilizing private sector by having this sourcing out of other services that government cannot really provide. At the end of the day, when you provide for facilities, you need to have that complete component of that healthcare facility where you need your healthcare or health human resources for health, and also you need your commodities and information technology. So all of these facilities has to be completed, and all of these components completed, not just facilities, but also having healthcare workers, commodities, information technology, and equipments all in one, so that we can better provide access to all Filipino people.
Thank you so much for that thorough and comprehensive response. And as a final note, we are so lucky because we have with us not only our Education Secretary, but our Vice President. So as a final note, Ma'am Vice President, could you just give us your thoughts on the State of the Nation address?
Right. Thank you. Good morning once again to everyone. First off, I'd like to thank our Department of Finance, the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, PICC, for organizing this post-SONA briefing of the Cabinet Secretaries for our business community and for the entire country. Thank you very much for this opportunity to speak before all of you and explain the respective work that our cabinet secretaries and our departments need to do during the administration of President Marcos. Yes, so initially, the State of the Nation of President Marcos, I think everyone or many of those who do not understand economic numbers were overwhelmed with the numbers in the first part of the speech. That was, I think, the reason why it took a long time for people to start clapping, because the economic part was in the beginning, and many people really do not understand economic numbers. But another observation of mine was immediately after the speech of the President, while I was going home, I was talking to one of our writers in my office, and I told him that I really liked how the speech was written, because I do not write that way, and I truly appreciated the form that that speech was composed. And as a cabinet secretary and one who is the other half of the unit team, I would say that the State of the Nation of address of President Marcos was on point and perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. So as we can see, the unity here is very evident. The unity among all the cabinet secretaries is very evident with the president, and we hope that the unity will also transcend to the private sector and the diplomatic corps. So thank you very much. Thank you to our panel, and I believe, may I call on once again our my most esteemed co-moderator, Mr. Tony Lambino. Thank you so much to our panel. We will now have a photo op.
Yes, please. Can we call all the speakers and panelists to the steps of the stage for a group photo? All speakers and panelists, please. While we are choreographing the photo, can we please also announce that we are capturing complementary initiatives from everybody who is here with us in PICC or watching online or through PTV4. It will be done through slido.com, slido.com, and if we could flash the instructions on the side screens, not the back screen because we need that for the backdrop, and for everyone to please key in the event code 3346686 and respond to the 5 simple questions. What complementary initiatives in your mind or that you know of or that you run yourself resonates with anything that was said today? And if we could ask for the name of the initiative, a description of that initiative, and a point of contact so the relevant agency can get in touch with you in their planning and implementation process. So slido.com or through the Slido app, event code 3346686. Thank you very much on behalf of the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas and the Department of Finance. We would like to thank all the agencies that have contributed to this event. Of course, also the following: PICC,
RTVM, PTV4,
BSP's Monetary Board, HWD, TDIO, FMED, and SCA, as well as, of course, the DOF team.
and we would also like to thank VideoSonic,
And especially all of you for staying with us all morning and for an extra 30 minutes.
We would like to give a special thanks to our diplomatic corps, to
Our development partners as well are here today.
and of course to our panelists, our dear, most distinguished cabinet secretaries, and our Vice President, Inday Sara Duterte.
Maraming salamat po. Please have a good day.